A genius inventor, while deep in an experiment, suddenly finds himself unexpectedly disconnected from his own life and transported back in time. To his shock, he becomes the crown prince of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. Armed with knowledge from the future, he begins to revolutionize the nation. While other kingdoms still rely on oil lamps, his country is illuminated by electric lights. While others use horses for travel, his nation already boasts trains. And while enemy soldiers march into battle wearing fabric armor, his forces are clad in iron armor and armed with 6-barrel guns, turning every battle into a decisive victory. Follow the journey of a 9-year-old crown prince as he reshapes his kingdom into the most powerful dynasty in history. Our story centers on Kim Jin-ho, a prodigious inventor with an unparalleled ability to create. In middle school, he successfully built a working steam engine. By high school, he was forging iron armor with the precision and skill of a master craftsman from the ancient world. In college, he designed a human-powered plane that ran without fuel. He even crafted a peculiar toy gun that packed more punch than a real firearm, an invention that almost got him arrested by the Royal Army on multiple occasions. But fate had other plans. During a sudden earthquake, Jin-ho accidentally dropped some explosive materials, triggering a disaster. In the blink of an eye, he was sent back in time, awakening in the body of a newborn baby. It didn't take long for Jin-ho to realize that his family in this life was far from ordinary. They were part of the elite upper class. Initially, he thought his parents were just typical nobles, but it didn't take long for him to discover that they were not only incredibly wealthy, but also wielded immense power. His father was the crown prince, the future king, and the 4th ruler of the Oeon dynasty in Korean history. Born into privilege, Jin-ho was a true heir to the throne, seemingly destined for greatness. Time flew by, and before he could even grasp it, he was already 4 years old. At this point, the current emperor decided it was time to pass the crown to the crown prince. With his father now ascending to the throne, Jin-ho automatically took on the title of crown prince. Like all royal children, he was expected to start his education early. However, with the mind of someone well over 30, Jin-ho found it incredibly frustrating to be treated as a child and pushed into basic lessons. In an attempt to avoid the grueling routine of studying, Jin-ho devised a clever strategy to use his father to his benefit. History had praised King Se-young the Great as a ruler who valued intellect and placed great emphasis on encouraging innovation and nurturing the brightest minds. Jin-ho's plan was to gather skilled craftsmen, introduce them to critical future knowledge, and earn his father's trust in the process. His ultimate aim was to enjoy a life of luxury, taking advantage of the rewards without lifting a finger. However, he still had to appear dedicated and studious to gain others' trust and manipulate them in his favor. The first step in Jin-ho's scheme was to win over those responsible for his education. These figures would hold influential roles in the court when he matured, making it crucial for him to secure their loyalty. The very next day, as he made his way to his studies, Jin-ho was struck by a nauseating smell. Curious, he scanned his surroundings to identify the source. There, in the grass, lay a massive pile of dung. Seriously, he thought, did people from ancient times just relieve themselves wherever they felt like it? At that moment, a group of palace maids walked by and bowed as they greeted the crown prince. Just as Jin-ho was about to continue on his way, the smell hit him again. Turning around, he saw that the last maid in the group had stepped directly into the pile, her dress now stained with filth. Jin-ho's temper flared. He immediately realized the source of the mess was a palace maid. Coming from a modern world where hygiene was a priority, he could not tolerate such unsanitary behavior. Determined to prevent this from happening again, Jin-ho decided it was time to confront his teachers. On his way to the meeting, Jin-ho began, "I saw a maid earlier with stains on her dress. It's natural for people to relieve themselves, but it's unacceptable to get it on your clothing." One teacher argued that clothing not only covers the body, but also shows one's social standing. so a little discomfort should be expected. However, Jin-ho, thinking with a modern mindset, immediately countered, even if a person wears torn clothes, their inner qualities still shine through. Don't you think judging someone based on their clothes is outdated? The teachers were left speechless, realizing they couldn't respond. Quickly, they changed the topic. This issue can't be fixed overnight, Your Highness. Do you have any other questions? Frustrated by their evasion, Jin-ho pressed on. I recently read about the invasion of Tsushima Island. It mentioned that everyone, from the nobles to the common folk, had to enlist because the military forces were too weak. Why aren't we training a proper navy? He continued his barrage of questions, leaving the teachers stammering. Also, why didn't we evacuate the civilians from the island? If the fear is that Japanese pirates would occupy the land, wouldn't it be better to move the people to northern Osan? The more Jin-ho spoke, the more the teachers began to sweat. They hadn't expected the Crown Prince to be so knowledgeable about national matters. But no matter how much Jin-ho questioned them, the elderly scholars insisted these matters were beyond their influence. Hearing this only made Jin-ho angrier, but there was little he could do. Afterward, the scholars gathered together, amazed at the Crown Prince's intelligence, especially considering he was only 5 years old. While most children his age were still playing, he was outsmarting his teachers. They agreed that if the Crown Prince was already so wise, they should teach him more advanced topics. When he became emperor, he would undoubtedly be a wise and capable ruler. Meanwhile, Jin-ho, still inside the palace, had no idea that his life had just become more difficult. He already hated studying, and now they would make him study even harder. He was still frustrated by the arrogance of the scholars. According to history, the original person who inhabited this body had passed away young from overwork. Jin-ho had planned to start making his moves when he turned 15, but given the current situation, he realized he needed to act sooner. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye, and now Jin-ho was 7 years old, officially crowned Crown Prince in front of the entire court. The ancient rituals were excessively complicated, leaving him completely drained. But after years of difficult studies, he had finally earned his position as Crown Prince. Now, he could sit in on imperial discussions with his father and the ministers, where he would be able to present his plans to develop the nation and strengthen its wealth and power. However, the biggest problem was the royal treasury. There weren't enough funds to operate. Despite being crowned Crown Prince, Jin-ho was still a 7-year-old child with no real authority. No one would listen to him. But he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He needed to start small. After writing on a piece of paper, he accidentally smudged ink all over it. Ugh, how annoying, he muttered. No matter how many times he used the brush, he couldn't get used to it. This era is just so inconvenient. Suddenly, an idea struck Jin-ho. Why not start by addressing the small daily problems instead of focusing on huge reforms? This was just the beginning. As Jin-ho walked outside, he saw the blacksmiths hard at work, molding hot iron into various shapes. This was the military supply division, an imperial facility where weapons were forged. The sight and smell of the hot metal filled him with excitement. I've missed the scent of metal, he thought. I should visit here more often and get to know the people. A supervising official approached, bowing deeply to greet the Crown Prince. Jin-ho smiled and nodded. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks to your hard work, the Zune fortresses are becoming more robust each day. The official, Lee Chong-ho, the overseer of the military supply division, felt honored by the prince's praise. It is my great honor, Your Highness, he replied respectfully. Jin-ho got straight to the point, asking, Who's the most skilled craftsman working with gold and steel here? Lee Chong-ho seemed surprised by the question. Gold and steel, Your Highness? He paused for a moment before answering. There may be someone who could help with that. After hearing Lee Chong-ho's suggestion, Jin-ho ordered the skilled blacksmith to be brought in. When the blacksmith saw the Crown Prince, He immediately knelt and bowed deeply. "I greet your highness," he said humbly. Jinho chuckled. "Humble? Don't be modest. You're working in the military supply division, responsible for strengthening Osen's defenses. How could you consider yourself humble?" The blacksmith quickly corrected himself. "Your grace, your boundless wisdom humbles me." Jinho took out a scroll and spread it on the table. "Come closer. I have something I need your help with." He placed a blueprint on the table and asked, "Can you create this?" The blacksmith examined the sketches, a puzzled look crossing his face. "What is this?" he asked. Jinho placed his hand on the table and explained, "This is meant to replace the traditional writing brush." The blacksmith's eyes widened in surprise. "It looks like something that can store ink and release it when writing, but the key feature seems to be controlling the flow of ink with each stroke." Jinho smiled, pleased that the blacksmith understood. "Exactly. Also, I need the nib to have a rounded tip to prevent excess ink from soaking into the paper. Can you also make the slit through which the ink flows as narrow as possible?" The blacksmith thought for a moment. "If I give it my best effort, I think I can make it about 5 megabytes wide." Jinho quickly worked out the measurements in his head. 5 mo. A kai is about 3 centimeters. That's about 0.15 millimeters. Do you think you can achieve that by hand? He continued. "You'll need to make several of these pens, and they must be finished quickly, not over a month's time. Since the tips will come into contact with water, we'll need to use gold and silver to prevent rust. The pens will be made from thinly hammered sheets. If the molds are correct, we could produce up to 20 pens a day." The blacksmith gestured to the drawing. "The main issue is the slit." Jinho nodded thoughtfully. "The line needs to be as fine as a single hair when writing," he said, musing to himself. "Maybe about the size of a mechanical pencil lead. 0.5 millimeters should be good." After considering the details, the blacksmith said, "I can make the slit about 1 GI wide." Jinho asked, "How long do you think it will take?" The blacksmith replied, "If you give me 2 days." Jinho immediately said, "I'll give you 3. Bring me your best finished work." The blacksmith eagerly agreed. "Understood, Your Highness." 3 days later, the blacksmith returned with the finished products. "I've created 5 nibs, each with a different line thickness. Please try them out and let me know which one you prefer." Jinho attached the nib to the pen and carefully dipped it in ink. As he made a swift stroke across the paper, the nib produced a fine, elegant line, exceeding his expectations. Jinho smiled, clearly impressed. "I love it. You did an amazing job," he said, praising the blacksmith. The blacksmith humbly replied, "It's all thanks to your guidance, Your Highness." After testing all the nibs, Jinho placed his order. "Make 100 more with this line thickness, and keep 10 in pristine condition." The blacksmith nodded immediately. "Of course, Your Highness." Jinho added, "Also, could you engrave plum blossoms on the nib of this gold pen?" Without a moment's hesitation, the blacksmith bowed and replied, "Of course, Your Highness." Han, full of excitement, inquired, "How long will it take?" The blacksmith, with unwavering confidence, assured him, "Only 10 days, Your Highness." Hyung, always cautious, replied, "I'll grant you 2 extra days, but I expect it to be flawless. I will present this to my father." Gong, the blacksmith, gave a deep bow and pledged, "I swear, there will be no flaws, Your Highness." Hyung, with one final request, added, "By the way, please keep this project a secret until I introduce it to my father." Gong quickly responded, "As you wish, Your Highness." With their conversation concluded, Hyung swiftly departed. From a distance, Lee Chong-ho, who had been watching, remarked, "His Highness is remarkably mature for his age." Gong, agreeing, replied, "I've heard he's only just turned 8, but the way he speaks and carries himself, it's as if he's 30. Lee Chong-ho, turning to him, asked, "Putting that aside, you've probably realized something by now." Isn't it wonderful to be the finest craftsman in Osen? It turned out that Gong had received a special certificate of recognition, personally given to him by Crown Prince Hyang. Gong cherished it greatly and said, "I'll need to find a skilled carpenter to make the perfect frame for this. It's truly a family heirloom in the making." Meanwhile, the nibs Hyang had requested were finally completed, adorned with intricate plum blossom engravings. When Emperor Yongnian tested the pen, he was astounded. "This is an extraordinary tool, 10 out of 10, he exclaimed. In the third year of Sai Yung's reign, the crown prince proudly presented the golden pen to the emperor. After trying it himself, the emperor was unable to contain his praise. "The wrist and arm feel so comfortable while writing with this pen. Even when writing quickly, it maintains its beauty. Truly, the crown prince has created something remarkable." Hyang humbly responded, "You are too kind, father." The emperor, pleased, declared, "The historians must record the remarkable achievement of the crown prince today." The historian, bowing respectfully, responded, "As you command, your majesty." Emperor Yongnian looked at the pen for a long moment. "You've done something truly extraordinary, crown prince," he said, noticing something special. "Is this a plum blossom?" he asked. Hyang replied quickly, "Yes, it's engraved on the nib as the royal family symbol." The emperor, filled with pride, responded, "Excellent! But how did you come up with the idea for this invention?" The emperor, eager to know, asked the crown prince to explain his reasoning. Hyang paused, thinking carefully, then responded with cleverness. "One day, when father was dipping his brush into the ink, I noticed something strange. The ink seemed to be absorbed into the bristles of the brush. Normally, water flows downward, but here the ink moved upward, defying what was expected. It fascinated me, and so I decided to create this." The emperor, impressed with his son's insight, said, "Many have used brushes, but none have observed it in the way you did. This is truly an example of learning through observation." Hyang, grateful for the praise, boldly replied, "Thank you for your kind words, father. I have one request." "Speak your mind," the emperor replied. Hyang turned to the servant and called, "Eunuch, bring them here." The servant entered, carrying a mysterious box. "Father," Hyang said, turning to the emperor, "I request that these golden pens be given to the historians and ministers of the court." The emperor, intrigued, asked, "All of these pens?" Hyang explained, "The ministers and officials who write quickly would benefit from them. The historians, who work tirelessly without rest, deserve something to ease their workload. I thought this might be helpful to them." Everyone present was taken by surprise. No one had ever thought to show such empathy toward the historians. The emperor, turning to the ministers, asked, "What do you think of the crown prince's idea?" The ministers, all in agreement, said, "We believe the crown prince is right. It's truly remarkable for someone so young to think about the well-being of his officials. It's a beautiful gesture." Finally, the emperor gave his approval. "Distribute the golden pens to the historians and court officials," he ordered. The servants quickly obeyed. Throughout the ceremony, the emperor smiled with joy, and the ministers shared in his happiness. "His Highness, the Crown Prince, truly has a deep and thoughtful mind," they remarked, while Hyang smiled contentedly. Not long after, the golden pen Hyang had created set a new trend in Yoshan. In the third year of Sai Yung's reign, after presenting the pen to the emperor, Hyang's invention was praised as a remarkable tool. The emperor, deeply impressed by the crown prince's brilliance, ordered the pen to be distributed to those in need, ensuring that Hyang's thoughtful gesture would benefit the entire court. The reaction was overwhelming. Court officials and ministers were captivated by the new invention, and the excitement surrounding it spread like wildfire. "Have you tried the golden nib pen that the crown prince invented?" one official asked. "I have, and it's truly remarkable." It became incredibly popular because it made writing official documents so much easier. Additionally, Hyang had created a portable writing board for the generals, allowing them to issue urgent orders comfortably wherever they were. The writing board was the perfect match for the golden nib pen, and everyone who used it couldn't stop praising it. "This is incredible!" they exclaimed. Emperor Uni was very pleased and ordered that both items be mass-produced, distributing them to the generals alongside the golden nib pens. The golden nib pen that Hyang had invented brought about significant changes in the kingdom. A few days later, during a court session, a minister spoke to the emperor. "There's been an unfortunate incident in the market." "An unfortunate incident?" the emperor asked. "Speak," he commanded. "There are rumors that counterfeit golden nib pens are being sold everywhere," the minister explained. "How dare they forge such a valuable item, especially one that bears the royal symbol?" "This is an outrage," the emperor exclaimed. "The punishment must be severe." The officials all agreed in unison. "We urge your majesty to punish them strictly." The emperor, remembering Hyang, said, "I believe we should consult the crown prince. After all, he is the one who invented the golden nib pen." The eunuch immediately called out, "Summon the crown prince." A short time later, Hyang arrived. "Father, you called for me?" The emperor got straight to the point. "The ministers have reported that counterfeit golden nib pens are being sold. They must be severely punished. I'd like to hear your thoughts, my son." Hyang bowed and replied, "Yes, father." He furrowed his brow in thought. Everyone's eyes were on him, waiting to hear the young prince's response, admiring how thoughtful he seemed. A few moments later, Hyang finally spoke. "Father, may I take charge of this issue?" Before anyone knew it, a month had passed, and the crown prince made his move. Hyang calmly entered the Ministry of Revenue. At his arrival, every official quickly knelt and bowed with the utmost respect. "Your Highness, we honor the crown prince," they said in unison. Hyang looked at them with a calm demeanor. "So, do you understand why I'm here?" He held up a pen. One official's face turned ashen at the sight of it, and no one dared to lift their gaze. "None of us would allow our guilds to be part of such a disgraceful act," one official nervously replied. "My guild would never be involved in something like this," another added in defense. Hyang observed them briefly, then replied, "I'm not here to point fingers at you. Stand up." Cold sweat dripped down their faces, and their hands trembled as Hyang's next action was to slam his hand on the table, his voice lowering in authority. "Don't make me repeat myself. What do you think you're doing? Stand up immediately." The officials stood shakily, regaining their composure, as Hyang took his seat, exuding confidence. "Let me be clear. I am ready to award the production of both golden nib pens and ordinary pens to one of your guilds. However, those producing the golden nib pens will be required to give 20% of their earnings to the royal court. Furthermore, the retail price of the pens must not exceed 60% more than what it costs to produce them." An official, clearly uncomfortable, hesitated before speaking up. "Your Highness, if I may, there's an issue." He carefully explained his point. While a 60% markup seems generous, factoring in the wages of the workers and the sellers, we'd only be left with a 30% profit. With the 20% taken by the court, that leaves us with just 10%. At that moment, Hyang's expression darkened. He slammed his hand onto the table in frustration. "Are you lying to me?" The official fell silent, realizing his mistake. Hyang pointed at him and barked, "I said 20% of the 30% profit. That means you'd only keep about 6%, not 10%. Take this dishonest fool out of my sight and strip his guild of their bidding rights." The man froze, stammering for a reply, but two soldiers swiftly dragged him away, ignoring his desperate pleas. "Please, Your Highness, have mercy." One of the officials glanced nervously toward Hyang, but no one dared speak as the room became tense with silence. Hyang's tone remained firm. "Both my father and I agree that the prosperity of merchants and commoners is vital. No one can thrive alone. Everyone needs assistance in life." He suddenly stood up, his voice rising with authority. "However, if any of you dare to deceive like he did, you will be seen as nothing more than trash. Understand?" All the officials bowed deeply and responded together. "We will remember, Your Highness." With Hiang's position now made clear, the bidding process for the golden nib pen moved forward without further deception. Hiang called for the eunuch to meet him privately. A sly grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You did well, eunuch." I wouldn't dare, Your Highness," the eunuch replied, his brow furrowed. "But, if I may ask, why did you take such drastic measures?" Hiang let out a quiet sigh. "You know, I'm still young and lacking in experience. I don't have many other options." The eunuch nodded in understanding. "Indeed, Your Highness. Well, if you'll permit me, I'll take my leave now." "Go ahead," Hiang replied, his heart filled with satisfaction. "Good. Everything is going smoothly. Just keep this up." But then, a sudden interruption. An official spoke out. "Your Highness, I, Grand Chamberlain Su-am, have an urgent matter to discuss," he said in a stern voice. "We can no longer proceed with the Crown Prince's plan," the official informed the Emperor with a resolute tone. "Your Majesty, I, Grand Minister Su-am, must report something of great importance." This was the first time Hiang had encountered such political maneuvering. With a determined gaze, he turned toward the man. Su-am spoke again, his words final. "We cannot continue with the Crown Prince's plan, Your Majesty." Since Hiang's reincarnation, he had been showered with endless praise and laughter, particularly as the royal treasury flourished. Everyone was overjoyed by the financial success that followed the introduction of golden nib pens. The economic situation had steadily improved, generating revenue like never before. Thanks to this, King Sejong and the ministers began to pay closer attention to the benefits of trade. The emperor praised Hiang, saying, "The crown prince has truly done something remarkable." However, those less fond of the prince began meeting in secrecy. A small group of conspirators huddled together, discussing in hushed tones. How can the court turn into a marketplace? The merchants will become the lowest class in society. The emperor and the officials are showing far too much favoritism toward them, one man said, stroking his beard. This all originates from the crown prince. We must act swiftly to reveal this to the emperor, or else things will continue to spiral downward. The group agreed. No matter how clever the crown prince is, he is still just a child. It is a grave error to allow a child to decide such important matters. But before they could carry their complaints to the emperor's father, Grand King Tejong, passed away on the 10th of May during the 4th year of Sejong's reign. Grand King Tejong died at the age of 56, forcing the conspirators to delay their plans. "It seems we'll have to wait for a better opportunity," one said, and the others reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Hiang was overwhelmed with work day and night. He buried himself in book after book. "So the books from Europe in this era come here through China," he mused, hands on his hips and a confident expression on his face. "Hopefully, this will help me with the source of my inspiration. If I claim these ideas as my own, they'll grow suspicious." Hiang's face darkened. "I need to figure out how to deceive them." Everything was proceeding as planned. During the formal court presentation, Hiang spoke with clarity and logic. "Therefore, I believe it would be far more practical if we adopted these Indian numerals, or, as the Westerners call them, Arabic numerals, for use in our country." The ministers reacted. Minister of Revenue, Kim Jung, spoke up first. "After careful thought, I believe these Indian numerals would indeed be useful for representing numbers." Minister of Rights Hayad Du also agreed, saying, "I share that opinion." The emperor quickly made his decision. "With the support of these two important ministries, we will allow the use of Indian numerals starting next month. If the results are favorable, we will implement them nationwide." Everyone responded in unison, "We obey, Your Majesty." As the next petition was read, the emperor paused. "I think the crown prince should hear this." Hyang, confused, replied, "Yes, father?" The emperor rubbed his temples, looking weary. "The emperor of the Ming has sent a letter. Emperor Zhonggle is very pleased with the golden nib pens and has requested that we send an additional 10,000 as tribute." Hyang knew the royal treasury was struggling and immediately began formulating a plan. A sudden idea struck him. "Father, what if the court were to establish its own guild?" At the mention of the word guild, everyone was shocked. "How could that be?" "Minister of Rights," Heen protested. The emperor motioned for him to be quiet. "The crown prince has more to say. Continue," he urged. Hyang began explaining in detail. Since the emperor of the Ming has requested more pens, it's clear they are in high demand in the Ming dynasty. With its vast territory and large population, the number of literate people there must be far greater than in our nation. If we collaborate with merchants to handle the production of golden nib pens, we could easily meet the Ming dynasty's demands, and then some. The emperor listened thoughtfully. Minister Kim Jung was already calculating in his head. If we base our projections on that, both the emperor and I can expect considerable profit. Hyang continued, "We can also arrange for merchants to accompany our diplomatic missions to the Ming dynasty. In return, the merchants would only need to cover their lodging expenses." Minister Su Am growled in protest. "No, we cannot proceed with the crown prince's plan." He presented his concerns. While the crown prince's plan would certainly bring wealth to the court, if we grow too rich, the people may become self-indulgent, leading to luxury and excess. This could result in tyranny, and the royal family's power would be compromised. Another official spoke up. "I, the Minister of Rights, agree with Minister Su Am. How could we allow such lowly merchants to accompany a diplomatic mission to the Emperor of Ming? It would tarnish the honor of our nation, Yosan." Hyang, determined, asked Minister Swam, "Do you think we should continue to live in poverty and find joy in it, as some claim a king should? Have you seen any commoners who truly wish to live in poverty and remain virtuous? They suffer from droughts, starvation, and freezing winters. Who would praise their virtue?" With authority, Hyang continued, "Even a noble would do anything to feed his starving child. A king should be no different. A king is the father of his people. Shouldn't a father act to care for his children?" The emperor, visibly moved, declared, "My son speaks wisely." No one dared to challenge Hyang further, and the scribes quickly recorded the emperor's words. With the court in silence, Hyang passionately continued, "For the prosperity of our kingdom and to save our people, we must take action." The emperor, once again impressed, praised his son. "My son speaks wisely."
Thank you to all our Patreon VIP members who support us and get access to up to 16 episodes early. Link in the description.
The emperor took a brief moment to steady himself, while Hyang, noticing this, pressed on as the court remained in expectant silence. "Go on," the emperor urged. "Yes, father," Hyang responded. "The ministers and nobles beyond the palace walls can endure hunger because they understand both the reason and necessity behind it. However, the common people do not possess such knowledge, nor do they comprehend how to withstand such suffering. If we truly wish to educate them, shouldn't we first ease their burdens by lessening their hunger?" The emperor slammed his hand onto the table. "Precisely." The entire court watched in stunned silence. Hyang thought to himself, "Father's growing too agitated. Perhaps I should end things here for today." Yet, he continued, "Throughout history, it has been said that the will of the people reflects the will of heaven. Even if we, as rulers, uphold virtue, what would the gods think if our people remain in despair? Moreover, it is often said, man proposes, but heaven disposes. If we have done all that is within our power, should we not then wait to see how the heavens respond? Yet whenever droughts or plagues befall the land, ministers are quick to claim that it is due to the emperor's waning virtue, insisting that preserving virtue takes precedence over all else. Is that not a contradiction? Yang then turned to the court. Many among you have served since before this dynasty came to be. Then tell me, why was King Tao never accused of losing virtue when he established this very kingdom while still a subject of Goryeo? Or what of my grandfather, King Taejong? Was he devoid of virtue for raising his sword against his own brothers? And what of my father? Is he lacking in virtue because he ascended the throne instead of his elder brother, the rightful heir? Grand Minister Swam immediately interjected, his voice urgent. Your Highness, that is not what we meant. He turned to the Emperor in desperation. Your Majesty, we have never entertained such treasonous thoughts. We beg your Majesty for mercy. The ministers followed in unison. Please, your Majesty, grant us mercy. The Emperor, his expression firm yet composed, finally spoke. The Crown Prince's words may have been severe, but I trust the ministers will not take offense. Yang, mind your words in the future. Yes, Father, I will be more careful, Yang responded swiftly. The Emperor then addressed the court. I want you all to understand, I too believe that ensuring the well-being of the people is of utmost importance. Furthermore, the tribute to the Ming Emperor will proceed according to the Crown Prince's proposal. The officials lowered their heads in compliance. As your Majesty commands. The Emperor turned back to Yang. Do you have anything more to add? Yang immediately replied, rather than simply distributing food as charity, I believe it would be wiser to provide sustenance in exchange for labor, Father. The Emperor, intrigued, raised an eyebrow. You propose paying them? Yang elaborated. Droughts are not solely caused by a lack of rainfall. Our limited irrigation systems and neglected reservoirs also play a significant role. If we wish to prevent future disasters, we must construct water storage facilities in every town and restore the ones that have fallen into disrepair. By enlisting the people for this task and compensating them with food, we can address both hunger and infrastructure at once. Would this not be solving two problems at once? He turned toward the ministers. What do you all think? The court officials, after a brief murmur of agreement, responded unanimously, Your Highness, this is an excellent proposal. The Emperor gave a firm nod before issuing his command. Crown Prince, return to the palace. Yang bowed deeply. Yes, Father. Just as he was about to leave, the Emperor seemed to recall something. And do not forget, you must prepare to take part in state discussions once the ancestral rites have concluded. Thank you, Father, for granting your inexperienced son the opportunity to partake in such matters, Yang replied before turning to depart. Rising from his seat, the Emperor declared, Court is adjourned. You are all dismissed. As your Majesty commands, the court echoed. Yet before anyone could move, the Emperor's voice suddenly deepened, taking on a graver tone. One more thing, he added. Perhaps it is time I truly consider something. Tell me, what do you all honestly think of this dynasty? The ministers were gripped by fear. Your Majesty, we would never even dream of betraying you, they pleaded desperately. Please, have mercy. The Emperor's expression turned cold. Go back to your duties, he commanded. Mercy, your Majesty. They echoed as they hurriedly left the hall. Outside, murmurs spread among the officials. One misstep and disaster could strike, one whispered. He isn't just King Teo's descendant. His lineage is deeply tied to the previous rulers as well. Grand Minister Sum shot them a stern look. Enough of that nonsense. If you value your positions, you'll be careful with what you say. Another official sighed. I can't help but wonder, is this truly the path our nation is headed down? The others exchanged cautious glances before one warned, You should know by now. Careless words can lead to ruin. Suum exhaled slowly. We made a grave error today. We dismissed the Crown Prince because of his youth, but he has proven to be far more formidable than we expected." One minister hesitated before asking, "Then, what do we do now?" Suum's expression darkened. "If it comes to it, we may have no choice but to submit a formal resignation." The suggestion stunned the others. "Resign?" Suum folded his arms. "Our role is to guide the ruler, ensuring he stays on the right path. Even ancient texts say that a wise leader listens to the voice of his people. We must make sure the emperor remains wise." His tone carried a weight of unspoken intent. When King Si Yunk's order was proclaimed, the Ministry of Revenue set to work crafting golden nib pens, intended as tribute for Emperor Jongle. However, an issue soon arose. The emperor's expression darkened. "What do you mean they won't meet the deadline?" A court official bowed low. "Your Majesty, I beg your forgiveness, but the Merchant Guild responsible for the pens has informed us that they cannot produce the required amount in time." Jinho had anticipated this. Given the current state of Joseon's workshops, meeting such a demand within the given time frame was unrealistic. After a brief pause, he addressed his father. "Your Majesty, I need to clarify something. May I summon the leader of the Merchant Guild?" Suum immediately protested. "This is unacceptable. A mere merchant has no place in affairs of the state." The emperor remained composed. "Grand Secretary, you knew exactly how I would respond. Yet you still chose to interrupt me, didn't you?" Realizing his mistake, Suum hesitated. "Your Majesty, The emperor continued, his tone unwavering. "I acknowledge your loyalty, but instead of dismissing every proposal outright, why not present an actual alternative?" Lowering his head, Suum murmured, "I seek your Majesty's pardon." The emperor dismissed the matter. "Summon the merchant at once." Not long after, the guild's representative was brought before the court and knelt. "Your humble servant greets your Majesty." The emperor gestured toward Jinho. "The Crown Prince has a question for you. Answer honestly." "Yes, your Majesty," the merchant responded. Jinho's gaze was steady. "I understand that your guild is unable to fulfill the order on time. What is the reason for this delay?" The merchant bowed his head slightly. "Golden nib pens require meticulous craftsmanship. Each piece must be crafted with precision and care. Even if we work faster, there are limits to how many can be made within the time frame." Jinho considered this. "So, the entire process relies on a single artisan for each pen?" "That is correct, Your Highness," the merchant confirmed. "A skilled craftsman must handle each one individually." After a moment's thought, Jinho turned to his father. "Your Majesty, I believe I have a solution. However, I will need to speak with the artisans directly." Suum reacted immediately, his voice rising in protest. "Your Majesty, first a merchant. Now the prince wishes to summon mere craftsmen to the royal court? This cannot be allowed." The emperor's patience wore thin. "Grand Secretary, silence yourself. Why should I not summon them when this matter concerns the kingdom itself?" Suum, still displeased, attempted to argue. "Your Majesty, But the emperor had heard enough. "If you persist in arguing, I may begin to doubt your loyalty," the emperor warned, his voice heavy with authority. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. No one dared to challenge him further. With a firm gesture, the emperor commanded, "Summon the craftsmen at once." When the artisans arrived, Jinho addressed them directly. "I've been told that each of you is responsible for crafting an entire golden nib pen from start to finish. Is that correct?" The craftsmen, kneeling, responded in unison. "Yes, Your Highness." Jinho gave a thoughtful nod before continuing. "I have a proposal. Rather than each craftsman handling the entire process alone, why not divide the labor? One person could shape the nib, another could refine it, and a third could engrave the final details. Would this method improve efficiency? The craftsmen exchanged startled glances before one of them hesitantly replied, "It may be possible, Your Highness. We would need time to adjust, but once accustomed to the process, we should be able to produce the pens much faster than before." Jinho smiled. This concept is called division of labor. When tasks are shared among many, production increases significantly. The Emperor, clearly impressed, nodded approvingly. That logic is sound. We shall look forward to seeing the results. You may return to your work. After the artisans had departed, the Emperor turned to his son. Division of labor to boost productivity. How did you conceive such an ingenious idea, Crown Prince? Jinho hesitated for a moment before answering. I observed the kitchen staff. The assistants and maids follow the head chef's instructions, each performing specific tasks instead of cooking a dish alone. That observation led me to this conclusion. The Emperor let out a hearty laugh. A brilliant mind indeed. To derive such wisdom from everyday occurrences, truly extraordinary. Ministers, what are your thoughts? The officials bowed and responded in agreement. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is exceptionally wise. However, Soom, unwilling to conform, voiced his dissent. Your Majesty, I fear the Crown Prince is wasting his intellect on insignificant matters. His sharp mind would be better directed toward studying the teachings of the sages. The Emperor's expression darkened. Why do you dismiss deep thought and insight as trivial? Did the great scholars not also reflect on matters that benefit the nation and its people? Or is it that you, Grand Secretary, refuse to acknowledge wisdom unless it comes from your beloved classics? Soom, realizing he had overstepped, quickly bowed. I only wish for the Crown Prince's growth, Your Majesty. The Emperor's patience wore thin. Is this not exactly what the Crown Prince mentioned the other day? That you believe my rule, and that of my ancestors, unworthy? Is that why you dare to speak such nonsense? Panic flashed across Soom's face as he stammered, Your Majesty, I would never entertain such disloyal thoughts. Please, I beg you to understand my intentions. Another minister, watching the exchange in silence, mused to himself, Soom may have been narrow-minded, but to suppress dissent so harshly. It is unwise for a ruler to silence opposing voices, no matter how talented his heir may be. Jinho, too, observed his father carefully. He's revealing his true nature again. Later, when Jinho returned to the Eastern Palace, he shut the door behind him and exhaled deeply. That was intense. If I hadn't thought of the division of labor in time, I wonder how things would have unfolded. He sat in contemplation. Come to think of it, division of labor doesn't even exist in this era. Though Adam Smith later formalized it, it had been practiced long before him. Historically, industrialized labor systems were shaped through agreements between absolute monarchs and market policies. But what about Rhone? Though it claims to be an absolute monarchy, in reality it is a battleground, between the king striving to uphold his authority and officials pushing for a republican system. Meanwhile, the common people yearned for a semi-republican government. If a ruler truly prioritizes his people over his officials, he can secure their support, thereby consolidating real power. Success won't come overnight. I must build this foundation piece by piece, ensuring my father's authority extends to the most remote corners of the kingdom. And for that, I need wealth. Determined, Jinho stood. The first step is clear. I will fill the treasury. Resolute in his decision, the Crown Prince left the Eastern Palace and made his way toward the main hall. The Emperor, taken aback, inquired, What brings you here? The Crown Prince respectfully answered, "I need to discuss something regarding the envoy preparing to journey to the Ming dynasty. There is a matter we must have the Ming Emperor verify." Those present exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. What was the Crown Prince plotting this time? Jin Ho calmly stated, "This concerns the envoy being dispatched to Ming. We need to secure confirmation from their emperor regarding an important issue." The emperor, intrigued, asked, "What exactly is on your mind now?" The Crown Prince offered a measured smile, his thoughts carefully calculating his next move. The first step to enriching the treasury was securing a monopoly on the trade of gold-tipped pens. He needed to ensure that Rowan's merchants alone would have the right to sell these prized pens within Ming's vast market. "The Emperor of Ming continues to request more of these pens from us, which indicates their immense value," he explained. "Since their empire is significantly larger than ours, their demand is naturally much greater." He continued, "Additionally, every time the Ming envoys arrive, they demand an excessive amount of tribute. We must request an official decree to regulate their demands." At this, Minister Swam, clearly unsettled, interrupted. "Your Highness, that is unthinkable. The Ming dynasty considers Rome a subordinate state. A vassal questioning the demands of its sovereign would be a grave affront." The Crown Prince, unfazed, challenged, "And why would it be offensive? Does being the larger nation give them the right to exploit smaller ones?" Swam countered, "That is not the issue. If we suddenly reduce the tribute they are accustomed to receiving, it could provoke serious repercussions." Jin Ho, growing irritated with Swam's constant resistance, thought, "This old man never fails to oppose me." Aloud, he said, "Do you even realize where all this tribute comes from? It is taken from the very people of our land, the result of their labor and sacrifice. Furthermore, the Ming dynasty's demands continue to increase, which means our own people's resources are diminishing. If this trend continues, even our treasury will suffer. Should we not address this crisis before it escalates?" Swam remained steadfast. "Your Highness, you still lack experience in governing state affairs. The envoys we deal with are not mere officials. They are eunuchs, those closest to the Emperor of Ming. If they speak poorly of us, we could be placing Roan in grave danger." The Crown Prince's patience wore thin. "Do you truly believe the Ming Emperor is so easily swayed by mere words?" Swam hesitated. "That is not what I mean. I fear that due to your youth, you may make rash decisions that bring significant harm in pursuit of minor benefits." The Crown Prince's expression darkened. "What does my age have to do with this? And did you not just claim that we are suffering major losses for insignificant gains? Every time the Ming envoys arrive, their tribute demands clog our roads for miles. Is that not wealth being stripped from our people and our treasury?" He pressed on. "Master Yoshan, the great sage, once taught that a true official prioritizes the well-being of the people above all else. Yet here you stand, advocating submission to these envoys as if we are their servants. What does that make you then?" Swam hastily tried to explain. "Your Highness, you are exaggerating. We are not submitting." The Crown Prince cut him off sharply. "I have not finished speaking." He continued, "Menus once taught that a virtuous individual, even while surrounded by wealth, remains compassionate. Even when seated at the highest ranks, they uphold their integrity, steadfastly walking the path of righteousness. Now tell me, does showering these eunuchs with gifts and false praise align with any of these principles? If not, how can you still call yourselves honorable men?" Then, without hesitation, the Crown Prince dropped to his knees, his voice filled with conviction. "Father, I beg you, let me lead the envoy this time. I will personally appeal to the Emperor of Ming and do everything in my power to put an end to this unjust tradition. Please, grant me your permission." He continued, "It is true that I am still young, only 9 years old, but my resolve stands taller than the highest mountain." The Emperor rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly before addressing his son. "The journey to Beijing is long and fraught with hardship." The Crown Prince met his gaze and replied firmly, "Rhone stands at a crossroads, a time of both crisis and opportunity. If we act wisely, we can build a foundation that will support 1,000 years of prosperity. But if we hesitate, we will remain nothing more than a small and isolated nation. I ask you, Father, to consider my words." The Emperor let out a deep sigh. "Return to your palace, Crown Prince. Eunuchs, escort him back to his chambers. He is too agitated. See that he calms himself." Desperation flashed across the young prince's face as he cried out, "Father, please, I implore you, allow me to go." Back in the Eastern Palace, frustration boiled over. The Crown Prince stormed into the hall and shouted, "Everyone, leave! Now!" The attendants scattered as he collapsed into a chair, his hands clenched into fists. Damn it, I let my emotions get the better of me. He sat there in silence, lost in thought before muttering bitterly, "That insufferable swam. He looks down on me because of my age, doesn't he? He's been standing in my way since the last time. Well, I refuse to let this go unanswered. Just wait and see, you wretches." Then he called out, "Eunuch, prepare for my departure to the Ming dynasty." The startled eunuch hesitated. "Your Highness, what? Why so suddenly?" I said, "Prepare my belongings. Now." Meanwhile, in the main hall, ministers debated among themselves. "Your Majesty, we cannot allow the Crown Prince to act so recklessly. Please consider our concerns." The Emperor let out a weary sigh. "Tell me, do you know how much sleep that child gets each night? Never more than 6 hours. He is only 9 years old, yet his mind is constantly occupied with ways to strengthen the nation. And all you ever do is reject his ideas again and again." The officials lowered their heads in shame. "Your Majesty, we are at fault. We deserve punishment." Just then a servant burst into the hall. "Your Majesty, an urgent matter." The Emperor frowned. "What is it?" The servant hesitated before replying. "The Crown Prince. He is preparing to leave." A stunned silence filled the chamber. "What?" One of the ministers gasped. "Where is he going?" Alarmed, the Emperor turned to the servant. "Where is that boy heading?" A eunuch stepped forward and answered cautiously. "It appears His Highness is planning to depart for the Ming dynasty immediately. He said he cannot afford to waste even a single moment if he truly cares for the nation and its people." The Emperor's expression darkened, his patience snapping. Slamming his hand against the table, he roared, "That reckless child! How dare he defy me like this?"
Want to stay ahead of the story? Get up to 16 episodes early, only on Patreon. Support the channel, unlock exclusive content, and be the first to know what happens next. Click the link in the description, and we'll see you way ahead. In the story. Now, back to the video. Fuming with anger, the Emperor stormed toward the Crown Prince's quarters. As he neared, he spotted 2 eunuchs leaving the chamber and bellowed, "You two! Stop right there!" The startled eunuchs quickly turned and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, we pay our respects." The Emperor narrowed his eyes. "Aren't you both assigned to the East Palace? Where are you headed?" One eunuch hesitated briefly before replying, "Your Majesty, we are on our way to the Office of Records." Suspicious. The Emperor pressed further. "And for what purpose?" The eunuch faltered but eventually muttered, "We were instructed to document all the gifts sent to the Ming envoys ever since the late King Taejo's reign." Hearing this, the Emperor's fury exploded. His voice thundered, "That audacious brat!" Meanwhile, in the Empress's chambers, a servant rushed in, breathless. "Your Majesty, a grave matter has arisen," the Empress turned sharply. "What's with all this shouting?" Panting, the servant blurted out, "The Crown Prince is preparing to leave for the Ming Empire." The Empress's face went pale. "He's planning to go to the Ming Empire. Does he think it's as simple as a casual outing? Why is he doing this?" "The prince insists it's to put an end to the Ming envoy's excessive demands for tribute," the servant explained. "The Ministry of Justice tried to reason with him, but he refused to listen. He declared that if no one else will act, he will go himself." After a brief pause, the servant added in a hushed tone, "His Majesty is already on his way to the East Palace." The Empress's heart pounded with anxiety. Without wasting another moment, she hastily left her quarters and rushed toward the palace, her mind racing. "What in the world are you thinking, my son?" The servants, startled by her urgency, hurried after her, calling out, "Your Majesty, please slow down." At the East Palace, the Emperor stormed inside, his temper boiling over. Pointing a trembling finger at his son, he roared, "You reckless child! What madness is this?" Standing his ground, the Crown Prince met his father's gaze and declared, "This is not recklessness, father. It is my duty." Outside, court officials stood in stiff silence, not daring to intervene. The Emperor's wrath echoed through the hall. "You're only 9 years old," he thundered. "Do you even understand the gravity of your actions?" The Crown Prince remained steadfast. "Age does not determine one's resolve. People use youth as an excuse to avoid responsibility, but I will not." Growing even more furious, the Emperor demanded, "And what makes you think you can shoulder this burden alone?" At that moment, the Empress burst into the hall, breathless. "Your Majesty, please wait." The Crown Prince clenched his fists. "If the Emperor is the father of the nation, then I wish to be its elder brother. When the envoys come, the people suffer. If I stand by and do nothing, what kind of elder brother would I be?" His words, though passionate, only fueled the Emperor's anger. "You foolish boy," he growled, gritting his teeth. "You dare defy me?" His patience snapped. "Steward, bring the whip and the punishment bench." A wave of shock rippled through the hall. The Empress gasped, horror-stricken. The officials outside stiffened, their faces filled with unease. The Empress rushed forward. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. He's just a child." The Emperor's expression remained unyielding. "And that is exactly why he must be disciplined. Empress, do not meddle in this matter." He motioned to the eunuchs. "Take the Empress out." Desperation filled her voice. "Your Majesty, have mercy." Before the eunuchs could act, the first lash struck. The whip cracked against the Crown Prince's legs, leaving a stinging red mark. With each strike, the Emperor roared, "Your first mistake, being arrogant beyond your years. Your second, showing no respect to those who serve you." But despite his tender age, the Crown Prince did not shed a tear. He clenched his teeth and bore the pain in silence. By now, the Crown Prince's legs were covered in red welts from the lashes, but the Emperor showed no mercy. He continued striking, saying, "Your third mistake is defying your father's orders. Reflect on your actions today and ensure this never happens again." Outside, the Empress had cried until she could shed no more tears, while the ministers stood uneasily, anxiously awaiting the outcome. At last, the doors opened, and the Emperor, still breathing heavily from his fury, stepped out. He ordered, "Summon the royal physicians to tend to the Crown Prince." The officials responded in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." As the Emperor passed, he noticed the Empress still sobbing and instructed her, "Care for the Crown Prince." He then glanced at the ministers and added, "You are all more petty than a child." One minister, unable to restrain himself, muttered, "How could the Crown Prince act this way?" Another, noticing the Empress nearby, quickly warned, "Be quiet. The Empress will hear you." With anger in her voice, the Empress turned toward the ministers. "Why couldn't you think as wisely as the child? Look at what's happened now." "I will never forget today." The ministers lowered their heads, acknowledging their failure. "We are to blame. We deserve punishment." In the Crown Prince's chambers, the Empress continued to scold him, her frustration clear. She slapped his legs repeatedly. "You troublesome child! Why do you always make me worry like this? Can't you behave?" The Crown Prince cried out, "Mother, it hurts!" He lay face down, thinking to himself, "No matter the life, it seems my legs always bear the brunt of things." After a while, the Crown Prince was surprised when he felt his mother stop striking him. The Empress, heartbroken, quietly wept before gently bending down to hold him. "Right now, I have no one but you, my child," she said softly. Hearing her words, the Crown Prince whispered, "I'm sorry, Mother." The scene shifted to the royal court, where the Emperor sat with an imposing presence, looking down at the gathered officials. He turned to one eunuch and ordered, "Bring me the documents the Crown Prince asked you to prepare." The eunuch quickly complied, "Yes, Your Majesty." Moments later, the eunuch presented a stack of documents. After reviewing them, the Emperor's expression darkened. "The smallest tribute they demand is worth 2 months of our annual treasury, and the largest can reach up to 5 months. If we include the tribute from smaller villages, the total could equal almost an entire year's worth of resources." He held up the records and challenged, "Do you see this, ministers? Here is the list of tributes sent to the Ming Empire. Year after year. What do you have to say about this?" Silence hung in the air. The Emperor, enraged, slammed his fist against the chair. "Why is there no response? Even the Crown Prince, a mere child, has considered this, yet none of you have thought to act." The ministers bowed their heads, speaking in unison, "We apologize, Your Majesty." The Emperor's anger flared again. "Choose the leader of the envoy and their assistant within 2 hours, or I will charge you all with treason." The ministers, their voices shaky, replied, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your grace." That night, as the Emperor gazed at the moon, the Empress's voice broke the silence. "Your Majesty," he turned and asked, "Is something troubling you, Empress?" She hesitated before speaking. "I stepped out for some fresh air as I couldn't sleep." "But Your Majesty, why did you punish the Crown Prince so harshly today? It seemed more severe than usual." The Emperor paused before responding. "The Crown Prince is a clever child, but sometimes he becomes too absorbed in his own intelligence. Today, he faced opposition from the ministers, and that led to this outcome. A tree that grows too straight can easily break if it lacks support. Without the ministers' trust, how can he properly care for the people?" The Empress listened in silence, watching him. The Emperor continued, "I believe the Crown Prince has the qualities of a sage. From now on, I will guide him to ensure he follows the right path." The Empress smiled softly, though she didn't fully understand his reasoning. "I may not completely grasp your deeper intentions, but if this is your goal, I have no other wish." After the harsh punishment, the Emperor immediately ordered the ministers to select the envoy leader and assistant. Although the Crown Prince's actions had been extreme, he had spoken no falsehoods. His methods, however, had surpassed the Emperor's patience, and for that, he was punished. The Crown Prince rested his head on his hand, exhaling repeatedly as he watched his younger brothers playing in the courtyard. His gaze lingered on the one closest in age to him, a boy whose future would shape the fate of the kingdom. That child, laughing and darting around without a care, was none other than Iu, his younger brother. But Iu was no ordinary prince. In the years ahead, this seemingly carefree boy would unleash a storm of bloodshed within these very palace walls. He was destined to become the 17th ruler of Yoshan, King Seijo. If history unfolded as Jin Ho remembered, Iu would orchestrate the downfall of the current King Mong before aiding Mong's nephew, King Danzhong, in ascending the throne. However, Iu's ambition wouldn't end there. He would rally the Guyujiang faction, staging a rebellion that would crush all opposition. Even his own brother, Grand Prince Anyon, wouldn't escape his grasp, poisoned to secure Iu's reign. The Guyujiang uprising was no minor skirmish. It was a full-scale coup, a brutal purge that redefined the kingdom's power structure in 1453. Jinho could still recall his teacher's words about Prince Shuang, a man who had forsaken both his younger and older siblings, turned against his grandfather and father, and cast an ominous shadow over the once prosperous Joseon dynasty. Historians condemned Shuang as a tyrant, and now, As Jin-ho stared at his innocent-looking brother, dread settled deep in his chest. That child would one day become a monster. Jin-ho clenched his fists. He couldn't stand idly by and watch history repeat itself. He had to act before IU's ambitions took root. A sudden thought flickered in his mind, curling his lips into a smirk. Yes, that was the answer. The best way to reshape someone's fate was through guidance. With a newfound determination, he strode toward his brothers, calling out, "IU, good morning." The two younger princes, IU and Aong, whose real names were Swang and Anang, halted their game and turned to him, bowing politely. "Good morning, elder brother." Jin-ho smiled warmly. "You both seem to be enjoying yourselves." Then, turning to IU, he asked, "Your writing lesson is soon, isn't it? Why don't we study together today?" IU blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" Jin-ho hadn't expected him to question it and stumbled over his words. "Why, I just want to see how you're progressing." But beneath the surface, his thoughts ran deeper. "You'll serve under me one day. You won't have the luxury to slack off." Yu's expression darkened with suspicion. He hesitated, then shook his head. "I'll study on my own." Without waiting for a reply, IU grabbed Aong's hand and pulled him away. "Let's go. We're disturbing our brother." Though his voice remained neutral, there was a flicker of irritation in his eyes. As the day wore on, the palace bustled with its usual routines. That evening, IU eagerly rushed toward the dining hall, his small feet pattering against the polished floors. A maid trailed behind him, sighing. "Young master, slow down. You'll trip." As IU neared the hall, hushed voices from a nearby corridor caught his attention. He stopped abruptly, pressing himself against the wall to eavesdrop. "His Highness." "The Crown Prince is truly exceptional," one servant murmured in admiration. "Despite his youth, he's already well-versed in literature and governance." "Indeed," another agreed. "A prodigy, born to lead." IU perked up, expecting to hear his name next. But as the conversation continued, his excitement faded. "Well, the second prince is competent, but compared to the Crown Prince, they were born to be compared," the first servant sighed. A sharp pang shot through IU's chest. His fingers curled into fists. Behind him, his maid noticed his expression and stormed toward the gossiping servants. "How dare you speak so?" "Carelessly?" she snapped. The startled maids dropped to their knees. "We deserve punishment!" Before his maid could drag them away for discipline, IU held up a hand. "Let it go," he said coolly. "It doesn't matter." On the surface, he seemed unbothered, but deep inside, an unsettling question gnawed at him. Why am I always second? A few days later, Jin-ho gathered his younger brothers in his chambers. Determined to strengthen their bond, he proudly held up 2 handmade flashcards, grinning. "Look, this is how this character is written. It represents the sky and the earth." Aong's eyes widened with delight. "Wow. Did you make these, brother?" Jin-ho puffed out his chest. "Of course. Well, I had the palace eunuch's help." These flashcards were part of his strategy, a way to spend time with his brothers while steering IU toward a different path. "With these, I'll make sure learning is enjoyable. He won't even realize I'm molding him." He turned to IU. "Come, have a look." But IU, unimpressed, shook his head. "I already have a tutor, I don't need them." Jin-ho's smile froze. IU's disinterest stung more than expected. Gahan, looking perplexed, asked, "Wouldn't it be more enjoyable if we studied together?" But before he could finish, IU abruptly cut him off. "I can handle it myself," he snapped. Turning away coldly, he added, "Please don't call me for things like this again." His sudden reaction left both Jihan and Eon startled and confused. The following day, IU sat in the courtyard, absorbed in his studies with his tutor. Concealed behind the bushes nearby, Jihan crouched low, quietly observing. "This kid is harder to figure out than I expected. I need to watch him closely every day," he thought. The tutor, with a warm smile, asked, "Do you find this section difficult?" IU returned the smile and replied, "Not at all. Your teaching is very clear, so I understand it easily." His respectful and composed demeanor took Jihan by surprise. "What's this? He's much nicer than I thought." Is he only difficult when dealing with me? The tutor continued, let's review the 3 fundamental relationships and the virtues of steadfastness we covered yesterday. IU immediately responded, yes, sir, and began reciting fluently. Loyalty of subjects to their ruler. The king is the guide of his people. Filial piety of a child to their parents. The father is both protector and disciplinarian. In this context, guide refers to someone who governs and takes responsibility for discipline, similar to a modern supervisor or guardian. As IU confidently recited, Ji-hun stood frozen in amazement. Not only has he mastered the 1,000-character script, but he's also memorized the 3 fundamental relationships and the 5 virtues of steadfastness. A memory flashed in Ji-hun's mind. His tutor had once mentioned a rumor about Grand Prince Swang. People claimed that while Swang wasn't quite as accomplished as King Moonjong, he excelled in both literature and martial arts. The only problem was that his older brother's brilliance overshadowed him. Was that really just a rumor? Gi-hun studied the diligent child before him, realizing what IU truly needed. That afternoon, during Swang's sword training, IU was rigorously practicing against a wooden dummy. As he struck, a loud noise startled him, causing him to lose grip on his sword. The heavy blade tumbled across the ground, stopping right at Ji-hun's feet. Picking up the sword, Ji-hun remarked, looks like you're training in swordsmanship. He lifted a wooden sword of his own and added, how about teaching me some techniques? I've only ever studied theory. I don't know much about actual combat. Though slightly irritated, IU didn't refuse. While demonstrating, he said, casually, it's not that complicated. You just do it like this. Standing beside him, Ji-hun nodded but hesitated. It looks pretty difficult, doesn't it? He raised his sword high, trying to mimic IU's stance, but the weight overwhelmed him. Losing balance, he toppled backward. With a yelp, ouch! He groaned. Startled, IU instinctively called out, big brother! Lying on the ground, Ji-hun let out a defeated sigh. Man, just as I thought, this is way harder than it looks. Scrambling to sit up, he added with a sheepish grin, I could really use your help. I have no talent for this at all. Could you teach me, just as a favor? IU furrowed his brows, considering the request. He remained silent for a moment, lost in thought. Then, unexpectedly, he burst into laughter. Why are you so bad at this? He teased. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the 2 brothers continued their practice. Ji-hun frequently stumbled, exposing his weaknesses, while IU corrected him. Like this? Gi-hun asked, swinging awkwardly. IU shook his head. No, lift your hand a little higher. Children have simple hearts. IU had always felt inferior. No matter how hard he tried, everyone around him constantly compared him to his older brother, making him resentful. But now, seeing that Ji-hun had weaknesses too, struggling in areas where he excelled, he felt a newfound sense of balance. For the first time, IU allowed Ji-hun to get closer. A warmth he had never shown before began to surface. The first step toward changing the future tyrant had begun. On a bright and pleasant morning, 2 noblewomen sat together in conversation. The lady dressed in rose-hued silk leaned in and murmured, have you heard about the study cards the Crown Prince created? The woman in blue nodded. Indeed, I've heard whispers about them. Oh? What have you heard? The lady in pink asked with intrigue. They say these cards make learning far more engaging, the lady in blue replied. A thoughtful expression crossed the lady in pink's face. Do you think these cards could help my son recognize Chinese characters more easily? Her companion smiled, knowingly. Perhaps. Never underestimate the power of word of mouth. That afternoon, the lady in pink approached her husband, a respected court official. Husband, she began, I've been hearing wonderful things about the study cards the Crown Prince designed. Surprised, he raised an eyebrow. How do you know about those? With a slight frown, she answered, I came across the information by chance. But tell me, wouldn't it be beneficial for our son to use them? The official stroked his beard in contemplation. I'm not sure. His wife, however, was determined. Why not request to borrow them from the Crown Prince? The mere thought of an adult asking a child for something made him uncomfortable. That would be humiliating, he grumbled. His wife's eyes narrowed. Is your pride more valuable than our son's education? His future and our family's standing are at stake. As it happened, they weren't the only family intrigued by the study cards. Soon a group of officials gathered and requested an audience with the young crown prince. Upon hearing their request, Jin-ho leaned back with a teasing smile. "Those cards were made for my younger brothers." Desperate, one official stepped forward. "Then please, sell them to us. Name your price." Feigning reluctance, Jin-ho let out a sigh. "If you insist, I suppose I have no choice." He raised 3 fingers. 3 sol. The officials collectively gasped. 3 sol was equivalent to 159 kilograms of white rice, a staggering amount. "What?" one official sputtered. Jin-ho remained unfazed. "Did you not hear me clearly? That's 159 kilograms of rice." Another official, sweating, asked cautiously, "Are you saying these cards are worth that much rice?" Jin-ho chuckled. "It's not just for the cards themselves. Part of the cost covers materials, another portion will be contributed to the national treasury, and the last part is for my own use." The officials exchanged glances. One of them hesitated before asking, "Your own use? What does that mean?" With a composed tone, Jin-ho explained, "Books. Due to various circumstances, books are quite expensive." The room fell silent as the officials pondered his words. Eventually, one of them sighed and said, "Fine. My wife has been pestering me about these cards anyway." As soon as one official agreed, others followed suit. "I'll buy them too." "Count me in. I need those cards for my children." Seeing the eager crowd, Jin-ho grinned. "Then it's a deal." With a newfound source of income secured, he felt triumphant. "Now, I can fully dedicate myself to my interests," he thought. However, another pressing matter remained: his father's health. That evening, in the emperor's private quarters, a lavish meal had been prepared. The emperor scanned the room, ensuring he was alone before reaching for a piece of roasted meat with his chopsticks. Just as he was about to take a bite, a sharp voice rang out. "Father!" Startled, the emperor dropped the meat. The young crown prince stormed in. "Are you eating nothing but meat again?" Jin-ho demanded. Annoyed, the emperor scowled. "What nonsense are you spouting now?" Inside the chamber, the two began their usual argument. "Even a dog would be angry if its meal was interrupted," the emperor muttered. Jin-ho remained unfazed. "But eating properly is crucial for your health." Outside the room, the eunuchs exchanged wary glances. "Should we step in?" one whispered. "Wait until His Majesty gives the order," another advised. Back at the table, the emperor slammed his fist down. "What are you implying? My meal is unhealthy?" Jin-ho crossed his arms. "Let's see." He gestured toward the plates. "Roasted chicken, charred pork, stir-fried beef with onions. Where are the vegetables?" the emperor faltered. "Well, this, Jin-ho smirked. "Exactly." And so, another round of their daily battle had begun. The palace maids knelt, sighing deeply. "Your Highness, please, enough. His Majesty has been under a lot of stress because of you lately." It all began when Jin-ho developed an unusual fixation on the emperor's diet. He became obsessed with what his father ate, constantly monitoring his meals. During the emperor's working hours, Jin-ho would sneak into his chambers, a thick book in hand, rambling endlessly. According to the nutritional guidelines of the Yuan dynasty, a well-balanced diet rich in vegetables is crucial for longevity and overall well-being. His concerns didn't stop at lectures. Jin-ho even took it upon himself to personally supervise the royal kitchen. "This dish has too much salt. Redo it. Cut down on the meat." The chefs, though irritated, had no choice but to obey. Even during mealtimes, he hovered beside his father, muttering, "Too much meat thickens the blood. Thick blood leads to stress. Stress weakens the body. A weakened body affects the mind. And if your mind isn't sharp, what happens to the empire? Chaos." Day after day, meal after meal, the emperor endured his son's relentless nagging, all in the name of father's health. The palace staff noticed the emperor's eye twitching with irritation, a sure sign he was reaching his limit. The maids, still kneeling, braced themselves for the inevitable outburst. As expected, the emperor finally exploded. "You insufferable brat! I've tolerated this nonsense because you're young, but enough is enough." He jabbed a finger at Jin-ho. "Stop meddling with my meals. Even a ghost, if it died from overeating, would at least have some dignity. Furious, he commanded, "Guards, remove the crown prince immediately, and from now on, he is forbidden from coming near me while I eat." Before Jin-ho could protest, palace guards seized him and dragged him away. "Father!" he cried, but the doors slammed shut behind him. Standing outside, Jin-ho frowned, deep in thought. This can't continue. If the old man falls ill, who knows what might happen to my future? He needs to stay healthy and reign for a long time. I need to find another way. Just then, from inside, the emperor's voice boomed. "Bring me more meat!" Jin-ho's eyes lit up. That's it. There's still one solution left. Without wasting a second, he rushed to the imperial carpentry workshop. "I need something made," he announced. The royal craftsman immediately got to work, but Jin-ho was relentless in his demands. "It must be rounder, sturdier." "Yes, your highness," the craftsman replied, exhausted from his constant corrections. The palace workers whispered among themselves, puzzled. What on earth is the prince making? Days passed, and the final product was presented to him. Jin-ho picked it up and pressed down on it lightly, only for it to snap in half. His temper flared. "This is unacceptable. Reinforce it. Make it stronger. Try again." The workshop rang with his endless instructions. "Do it again. Rounder. More durable." After several more days of refinement, Jin-ho finally strode into the throne room, holding his newly crafted items with a confident smile. The emperor, seeing his son approach, sighed in exasperation. "What now?" Jin-ho, unfazed, knelt before his father and presented his creations. "Father, I designed these for your health." Skeptical, the emperor narrowed his eyes. "What are these? They look like nothing more than a string and a child's toy." Jin-ho grinned. "No, father. These are carefully crafted health tools. This," he lifted the first item, "is an indestructible jump rope. And this," he held up the second, "is a set of specially designed bells. Together they will ensure you remain in peak physical condition." The emperor raised an eyebrow, suspicious yet intrigued. "And how exactly is this supposed to help me?" Jin-ho, beaming, replied, "Trust me, father. This is a revolutionary health plan." "This is an excellent way to stay in shape, father," Jin-ho declared, holding up a long rope. "It's called skipping." The emperor squinted at the contraption in his son's hands, unimpressed. "Jumping over a rope? And this is supposed to make me healthier?" Jin-ho, undeterred, smiled. "Seeing is believing, father. Allow me to demonstrate." The emperor gestured dismissively. "Go on then." Jin-ho looped a small bell around his neck, then firmly grasped the ends of the rope. He began hopping over it with practiced ease, his movements light and quick. The court officials watched in silence as the young prince performed the simple but rhythmic exercise. After a few rounds, he stopped, slightly out of breath. "And that," he announced, "is how you use a jump rope." The emperor raised a skeptical brow. "And how exactly does that improve my health? It looks like ordinary jumping to me." Jin-ho had expected this. He lifted a thick book, flipping to a page before responding. "Western scholars have found that those who sit for long periods tend to have weaker legs, but skipping helps strengthen the lower body." Then, lowering his voice conspiratorially, he leaned in, glancing at the gathered officials before adding, "It has another benefit too, but I'm not sure how to explain it." That caught everyone's attention. When it came to general wellness, the officials barely reacted. But when Jin-ho hinted at a more personal advantage, every ear in the room suddenly perked up, including the emperor's. The emperor narrowed his eyes. "Are you certain?" Jin-ho nodded earnestly. "Absolutely, father." The emperor stroked his beard, still hesitant. "It seems foolish, but if it truly has such effects..." He mulled it over before finally asking, "I just spin the rope and jump over it, correct?" Jin-ho beamed. "Yes, father. Just follow the rhythm of the bell." Turning to the palace steward, he called, "Steward, come here." An elderly attendant hurried forward. "Yes, your highness." Jin-ho unfastened the bell from his neck and handed it over. "Put this on the emperor." The steward bowed. "Understood." Jin-ho's expression softened as he looked at his father. "My greatest wish, father, is for you to live a long and healthy life." The emperor let out a reluctant sigh. With his son making such an emotional appeal, how could he refuse? He stepped into the courtyard. Jin-ho eagerly reached out. Father, let me tie the bell for you, the emperor frowned. Is this really necessary? Yes, it helps with the rhythm. As Jin-ho secured the bell around his father's neck, the emperor caught sight of his reflection in a nearby bronze mirror. He blinked. Wait, this makes me look like a farm animal, doesn't it? Jin-ho hadn't considered that, but once the emperor pointed it out, he couldn't unsee it. A sudden burst of laughter escaped him. The emperor scowled. What's so funny? Jin-ho wiped away a tear, shaking his head. Nothing at all, father. Let's begin. Still skeptical, the emperor picked up the rope. This feels ridiculous. You'll get used to it, Jin-ho assured him. Hesitantly, the emperor swung the rope over his head and jumped, once, twice. By the third attempt, he was already winded. Panting, he turned to the steward. How many times was that? The steward, after a quick count, answered dutifully. 9, Your Majesty. The emperor's eyes widened. Only 9. Jin-ho crossed his arms. You must keep going, father. The goal is 100. The emperor groaned. That many. Can't we lower the target since I'm just starting? Jin-ho shook his head firmly. No, father. You must persist. He straightened, his voice filled with determination. I will not leave until you reach 100. The emperor nearly choked. Word of the emperor's unusual new exercise quickly spread through the palace. It became a favorite topic of gossip among the officials. One day, a group of courtiers huddled together, whispering. Suddenly, one of them rushed over, looking urgent. Are you all still standing around? He asked breathlessly. 2 royal physicians exchanged glances. What's happened? The official took a deep breath before announcing gravely. The emperor coughed. One of the physicians frowned. His Majesty often coughs around this time. What's so unusual about it? The official leaned in, lowering his voice. It's not the coughing that's concerning. It's what happened after. The group held their breath. The official's eyes darted around before he revealed in a hushed tone, right after coughing. His Majesty ran straight to the plum blossom chamber pot. A stunned silence followed. For context, the plum blossom chamber pot was an exclusive royal commode, reserved only for the emperor's use. The news spread like wildfire. Ever since the emperor incorporated jump rope into his daily routine, noticeable transformations had taken place. Previously plagued by sluggish digestion, he now found himself more regular, much to the delight of the palace maids, who whispered about his improved well-being. But that wasn't all. He had begun working late into the night, managing state affairs with renewed energy. And, most intriguingly, he had been paying far more visits to the Empress's chambers than before. Whispers quickly circulated among the court. Have you heard? His Majesty has taken up jump rope, and now he uses the plum blossom chamber pot right after coughing. Another official chimed in. His complexion is looking much better these days. Do you think it's connected? A third official, stroking his beard, nodded gravely. It must be. Ever since he started exercising, the changes are undeniable. At that, the gathered officials fell silent, each contemplating their own declining health. I haven't been feeling great myself lately, one admitted. Same here. I haven't slept well in weeks and my wife won't stop complaining. Their eyes met in mutual understanding. Then, one afternoon, while Jin-ho was quietly engrossed in his studies, a commotion erupted outside. A frantic voice called out, "Crown Prince?" Startled, Jin-ho looked up to see a swarm of court officials rushing toward him, their expressions desperate. "What's the matter?" he asked, taken aback. Without hesitation, one of them blurted, "We need more jump ropes. We'll pay in rice. Just name your price." Another official eagerly interjected, "I need one for my wife and children." "And I want one for myself," someone else shouted. The scene quickly devolved into chaos, resembling an overcrowded marketplace. Jin-ho had to raise his voice to restore order. One at a time, speak one by one. He had never expected such overwhelming demand. Without wasting time, he rushed back to the woodworking shop and declared, "We're scaling up production. From now on, each of you will have a dedicated task. Rope making, handle crafting, bell attachment. Everyone has a role." The artisans, tears welling in their eyes, could only sigh in resignation. "Crown Prince, you're working us to the bone." But Jin-ho wasn't finished. "Prepare yourselves. We need to produce 500 more." Despair swept through the workers. Just kill us now. We're human too. And still, he wasn't done. He pulled out another design and handed it to a servant. Take this to the royal tailor. The servant squinted at the unfamiliar sketch. Your Highness, what is this? Jinho grinned. Jumping rope in traditional robes is inconvenient, so I've designed something better, exercise pants. And just like that, his innovations revolutionized the court's approach to fitness. Households across the kingdom began jumping rope together, their health improving by the day. Husbands grew stronger, wives became happier, and children followed suit, turning exercise into a family activity. People sang praises. Who would have thought something so simple could change our lives? The Crown Prince is truly a visionary. But while Jinho basked in the rewards, amassing an impressive stockpile of rice in his private storage, there were murmurs of dissent among the old guard officials. This Crown Prince, his reputation is growing too quickly. I hear he's selling these contraptions even to the highest ministers, one sneered. Another nodded gravely. A true nobleman does not hoard wealth for himself. One senior official, however, silenced the room with a raised hand. Patience. A small spark can ignite a great fire. If he lets his ambition cloud his judgment, he will eventually bring about his own downfall. The others exchanged knowing glances and nodded. The Crown Prince's rise was impressive, but would it last? As the days passed, preparations for the journey to Beijing were finally complete. Unlike previous diplomatic missions, where merchant caravans traveled alongside the envoy, the Minister of Foreign Trade proposed a new approach. King San, upon hearing the idea, turned to his advisors. Take Honk's proposal into account, he instructed. Ensure that our envoy conveys this suggestion to the Ming court. With that, the envoy embarked on their journey, and time continued to pass. Within the palace walls, Young stood alone in the courtyard, gazing at the vast sky, lost in thought. His quiet moment was abruptly interrupted by a cheerful voice. Hey, Young! Look at this! Do you know what it is? Turning toward the voice, he saw Princess Yong-su, the elder sister of King Mong, holding a tray of exquisitely shaped, colorful sweets. Haiyong furrowed his brow, thinking carefully before hesitantly answering. Is it Yagua? Yong-su burst into laughter, playfully smacking his back. Wrong! It's dosik, she corrected with amusement. You've been studying for 100 days and you still don't know this. Dosik was a traditional Korean sweet, often served with tea. With a teasing grin, she continued, You should take a break from burying your nose in books all day. If you keep this up, you'll end up looking just like father. At the mention of their father's round, plump figure, Haiyong instinctively flinched, his expression twisting in frustration. I'm still better off than you, he shot back. Yong-su, unfazed, strolled past him with an easy smile. I wouldn't be so... Sure, she quipped. Anyway, study hard today. As she passed by the palace eunuchs, she greeted them with polite grace. Good morning, Grand Eunuch. The elder eunuch, bowing respectfully, replied, Did your highness sleep well last night? In the Joseon court, princesses held esteemed titles, being the cherished daughters of kings. As Haiyong walked away, he muttered to himself, She's always like this. But I guess that's normal at her age. His thoughts lingered on his sister, the ever-radiant Princess Yong-su. But even as she smiled in the distance, an ominous realization struck him. In just 2 years, the entire palace would be plunged into grief. Yong-su was fated to succumb to smallpox. Once a feared and deadly disease, smallpox had ravaged humanity for centuries. It caused severe fever, painful rashes, and left survivors permanently scarred. In medieval times, its mortality rate soared as high as 30%. Among the 3 great disasters of the world, tigers, war, and smallpox, the latter was the most relentless. When Princess Yong-su fell ill, King San was devastated. She was his firstborn daughter, his pride and joy. But Haiyong clenched his fists in determination. I won't let that happen, he vowed. He had a plan. The scene shifted. Haiyong now stood before a cow, facing an elderly servant. This cow, Haiyong said, his eyes sharp with intent. It has smallpox, doesn't it? The kneeling cowherd respectfully answered, Yes, your highness. A smile tugged at the corners of Haiyong's lips. Excellent. You might just be the key. Nearby, his bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. What in the world was the Crown Prince planning this time? They were in Neobion Island, known in the present day as Jeju Island. The land here was unsuitable for farming, so the locals primarily raised livestock. Hyang turned to the farmers kneeling before him. "Do all of you raise cattle?" One of them, clad in a worn brown tunic, responded, "Yes, Your Highness." Hyang continued, "Which of you has never had smallpox? Raise your hand." A lone hand shot up. "That would be me, Your Highness," the man said. Hyang's eyes narrowed. "And have you remained free of smallpox, even after years of raising cattle?" The farmer nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. I've never caught it." Hyang's curiosity deepened. "Has Neo-Beon Island ever experienced a smallpox outbreak?" The farmer nodded again. "Yes, Your Highness. Every year, before the cold season begins." Hyang frowned. "Then tell me, why has no one here ever fallen ill?" The farmers exchanged uncertain glances before one of them finally admitted, "Well, to tell the truth, our doctor and landlord don't believe in it, but there is an old remedy we secretly use to stop the disease." Hyang's tense expression softened, and he grinned. "I knew it," he thought, recalling Edward Jenner, the man who pioneered the smallpox vaccine. Jenner had observed that those who contracted cowpox from cattle never succumbed to smallpox. After countless experiments, he had revolutionized medicine with the concept of vaccination. Eagerly, Hyang turned to the farmers and asked, "Does anyone here know how to perform this method?" A man dressed in white hesitated before stepping forward. "I do, Your Highness," he said. "Then use it on me," Hyang stated firmly. The farmer's face paled, as if he had misheard. What did you say, Your Highness?" Hyang, unwavering in his decision, held out a needle. "I want you to perform the procedure on me." The farmer's eyes widened in disbelief. Your Highness, you can't be serious." Meanwhile, back at the palace, the emperor was seated on his throne, listening to his ministers discuss state matters. "Our treasury is nearly depleted," one minister said gravely. "The only way to balance the budget is to increase taxes." Before the discussion could continue, a royal steward burst into the chamber, his face pale with panic. "Your Majesty, we have an urgent situation!" he exclaimed. The emperor, composed as always, raised an eyebrow. "What's happened?" The steward hesitated before leaning in and whispering something in his ear. The emperor's expression instantly shifted from calm to utter disbelief. "What? Where is the crown prince now?" he demanded, standing abruptly. The ministers, caught off guard by their ruler's sudden distress, murmured among themselves. "What's wrong? What happened?" The steward quickly explained. "His Highness has just returned to the palace." Without hesitation, the emperor rushed out of the chamber, his robes billowing as he stormed through the corridors. "Hyang!" he called desperately. The startled servants and officials hurried after him, watching their normally composed ruler race through the halls in near panic. When the emperor finally caught sight of his son in the distance, he shouted again, "Hyang!" Hyang, puzzled by the commotion, turned around just as the emperor ran up to him, breathless and wide-eyed. "Are you hurt?" the emperor asked urgently, scanning his son for injuries. Hyang blinked in confusion. "No, father. What's going on?" The emperor's expression darkened, and he turned sharply to the steward. "Explain. Now." The steward fumbled with his words, nervous under the emperor's intense gaze. "Your Majesty, I merely repeated what Yiko had told me." The emperor's eyes narrowed. "Yiko, come forward and tell me exactly what happened." A eunuch immediately fell to his knees, bowing so low his forehead touched the floor. "Your Majesty, I deserve punishment, but I swear I spoke the truth." The emperor's patience snapped. "Are you trying to make a fool of me?" Just then Hyang spoke up. "Father, please don't blame him. This is all a misunderstanding. It has to do with Neo-Beon Island." The emperor turned to his son, his expression demanding an explanation. "What do you mean?" Hyang exhaled, realizing this would be difficult to explain. "It's about an illness that sometimes spreads among the people of Rowan." The emperor's eyes narrowed. "Are you referring to smallpox?" Hyang's face lit up. "Exactly. I've been reading medical books from China, and I found a method to prevent it. So I tested it on myself by taking material from a cowpox infection and using it for inoculation." Silence fell. The emperor's mind reeled at his son's words, struggling to process the reckless decision. His breath caught, and before anyone could react, his vision blurred. The emperor collapsed. Gasps of shock echoed through the palace hall. "Father!" Hyang cried, rushing to his side. The ministers, alarmed, shouted, "Your Majesty, wake up!" But the emperor lay motionless, overwhelmed by the shocking revelation. After the initial shock, the emperor slowly regained his composure, his face ashen as he stared at Hyang with disbelief. "So, you're telling me you actually injected cow pus into your body?" the emperor asked, his voice trembling with confusion. Hyang replied calmly, without hesitation. "Yes, father." King San, still unable to fully process the words, stared at him, shaking his head. "You can't possibly understand what pus is, can you? There's no way." Before he could finish, Hyang chuckled lightly, interrupting him. "It really is pus, father. It comes from the wounds of the cow." The emperor, barely able to contain his anger, asked, "So, this procedure you're describing, you only applied it to your skin, right?" "No, father," Hyang answered bluntly. "I used a needle to inject it directly into my body." That moment, the emperor's rage exploded. He stormed forward, grabbed Hyang by the shoulders and shouted, "You reckless child! How dare you do something so dangerous just because you read it in a book? Do you think you can blindly follow?" "Any suggestion?" Hyang, trying to explain himself, said, "Father, I'm fine. An experienced person performed the procedure on me." The emperor, still stunned, asked, "What? Who did this to you?" Hyang pointed to the farmer standing nearby. Him, the farmer, now terrified, immediately bowed low. "Your Majesty, I am but a humble servant of the Crown Prince." Hyang introduced the man with confidence. "This man will be my servant in the future." "Well, actually, he's a shepherd from Neobion Island. He's the one who performed the treatment on me. He says it's a secret technique passed down through generations to treat smallpox on the island." King San, still disbelieving, asked, "A cattle herder?" "Yes, Your Majesty," the farmer replied. "That's correct." The emperor, stepping closer to Hyang, asked in a softer tone, "Crown Prince, are you telling me that this man is truly wise?" Hyang answered firmly, "Yes, father. He has cured everyone on his island." The emperor's voice rose again, filled with concern. "Even so, you didn't have to make yourself the test subject for this treatment. What were you thinking? You're the Crown Prince." Not backing down, Hyang responded, "A life is a life, father. There's no distinction between nobility or common folk when it comes to life and death. Many people have been cured and are now healthy again. So, why should I be afraid?" The emperor, still worried, said, "But this was too reckless. What if something had gone wrong?" Hyang sighed, taking a brief pause before speaking. "Father, you know just as well as I do how many people have died from smallpox in this country. I believe it will reach the palace one day. If I can prove this treatment works, we can protect not only the citizens, but also those we care about. Don't you agree, father?" King San, deeply moved by his son's words, stood silently for a long moment, lost in thought. He sighed deeply, thinking to himself, "I cannot decide whether this child will be a blessing or a curse for the kingdom." His actions and thoughts resemble those of a wise philosopher. Yet at times, he's like an untamed force of nature, striking a rock again and again without rest. Finally, the emperor turned to the guards. "Take this man to the prison. Ensure he's well fed and not mistreated." Then, addressing the cattle herder, he added, "If anything happens to the Crown Prince, I will take your life. But if what you've said proves true, you will be richly rewarded." The farmer, trembling with fear, replied, "I understand, Your Majesty." Meanwhile, Grand Inspector was having a conversation with the royal astronomer, Iron. The Grand Inspector remarked, "Have you heard about the Crown Prince? He claims to have been cured of smallpox after being treated by that lowly servant. He even injected that disgusting cow pus into himself." Iron, though skeptical, replied, "It sounds unbelievable, but if it's the Crown Prince, he must have his reasons. After all, he's capable of things no one else even imagines. Besides, he always spends his time studying in his chambers." This time, though, before Iron could finish, two men rushed past them, shouting, "The Crown Prince!" Iron, startled, asked, "What's going on?" Yunko rushed to respond, his voice urgent. "This is serious, Your Highness." At that very moment, Hyang lay in his bed, burning with fever. Despite his condition, he tried to reassure the concerned servants. "I'm fine." One of the servants, her face flushed with worry, retorted, "How can you say that? You're burning up like a furnace." Another muttered in frustration, What a fool you are! Meanwhile, in the prison, So Ado was tied to a chair. The warden barked at him, "You foolish man, how dare you put the crown prince at risk by insulting the royal family?" So Ado, bewildered, asked, "What's happening?" The warden scowled, "Don't pretend you don't know. The crown prince is suffering terribly. He's on the brink of death." So Ado, realizing what the warden was talking about, responded calmly, "Ah, you must be referring to the fever." The warden, surprised, asked, "How do you know about that?" So Ado answered nonchalantly, "There's no need to panic. It's common for a high fever to last up to 5 days. But after about 10 days, the fever will break and the crown prince will be fine, as if he's been cleansed." The warden, still skeptical, didn't believe it. But as the days passed, so Ado's prediction proved true. After exactly 10 days, Hyang recovered completely, as if nothing had happened. Later, in the palace, Hyang stood proudly before the emperor, announcing, "Father, I've completely overcome the threat of smallpox." The emperor, deep in thought, responded cautiously, "I can't be sure of that from just this incident." Hyang persisted, "Then let me go to a place where smallpox is spreading, and I'll prove it to you." The emperor immediately rejected the idea. "No, absolutely not." But Hyang pressed on. "How about this, father? Let's use this method to treat people in areas affected by smallpox. I'm confident that once explained, people will be cured after receiving the treatment." At that moment, the Grand Inspector spoke up from behind. "We cannot proceed with this, Your Highness. This could just be a coincidence. Furthermore, isn't the Crown Prince's method essentially forcing people into treatment?" Hyang was quiet for a moment before responding. "Grand Inspector, this method has been used by So Ado and his family for decades. How can you call it a coincidence? And since we're offering this treatment voluntarily, there's no coercion involved. Everything in this world advances through trial and error." Hyang's voice grew firmer. "If we don't try to overcome our fear of failure, how will our kingdom ever progress?" No one responded. The Grand Inspector stood silently, clearly frustrated. Following Hyang's suggestion, they focused on the regions most affected by smallpox, and the treatment began. Those who feared the disease the most eagerly took part. The method's effectiveness was soon proven. In addition, King Sejong ordered a dual investigation to coincide with the smallpox vaccination campaign, combining it with a population census to further verify the method's success. Once the results confirmed its effectiveness, King Sejong allowed the treatment to be implemented throughout the entire Joseon kingdom. One day, as Hyang walked through the palace, a voice called out to him, "Hyang, do you know what this is?" Turning around, Hyang saw it was his sister, Yongsu. Hyang smiled and replied, "It's sugwa, traditional Korean sweets." Yongsu grinned. "That's right. To reward you, I'll perform a little show with these." Though Yongsu wasn't particularly skilled with instruments, she played anyway. Hyang patiently listened, trying his best to endure the performance. Yongsu teased him, "You shouldn't spend all your time studying. Appreciate the arts a little more. And by the way, have you gained a bit of weight recently?" Just then, someone came to fetch her. "Princess, it's time to go." Yongsu waved cheerfully. "See you later, Hyang." Hyang watched her go, a smile spreading across his face. She always speaks her mind and leaves so quickly, he thought, feeling warmth in his heart. Watching his sister walk away, healthy and happy, Hyang whispered to himself, "It's good to see you well, sister." With the smallpox crisis now largely under control, Hyang turned his attention to matters of state. He began organizing medical case notes and compiled them into a volume, a compendium of traditional Korean healing practices and agricultural insights. He even authored a separate book detailing farming techniques, tailored to the unique climate of Jian. But Hyang didn't stop there. He submitted proposals covering a wide range of reforms, including a project to redraw the kingdom's official maps. Watching his progress unfold, Hyang couldn't help but smile with pride. All of this, he thought, is laying the groundwork for a more efficient, better-governed nation. Though certain ministers occasionally voiced complaints, Hyang often dismissed their protests without a second thought. His tireless efforts earned him a nickname among officials, the sleepless engine of the 6 ministries. The administrative heart of Jian pulsed with constant activity. never truly at rest, day or night. One evening, under a sky scattered with stars, King Sajang stood silently, reflecting on the state of his kingdom. He suddenly turned to his guards. "You don't need to follow me tonight," he said. A nearby attendant hesitated. "But, Your Majesty," Sajang cut him off gently. "I simply wish to speak with my son. Alone." As the emperor approached the crown prince's residence, he noticed the warm flicker of oil lamps still burning. Yang hadn't retired for the night. A palace aide stepped forward and remarked, "Your Majesty, the crown prince often works into the early morning, sometimes as late as 3, despite the doctors advising rest by 11. The emperor furrowed his brow. "He stays up that late?" Inside his study, Yang was deep in thought, scribbling on parchment, when he heard the announcement, "His Majesty has arrived." He immediately set down his brush and greeted his father. "Father, what brings you here at this hour?" "King." Sajang entered with a calm demeanor. "I was taking a walk and noticed your lights were still on," he said. "What's keeping you up tonight?" "I've been reading, Father," Yang responded plainly. The king raised an eyebrow. "Another Western book?" Yang nodded. "Yes, this one is titled The Art of Alchemy." The emperor looked puzzled. "Alchemy? What exactly is that?" "It's the practice of attempting to transform base metals, like iron or lead, into gold. Using various processes," Yang explained. The king stroked his beard, intrigued. "Turning iron into gold, is that even feasible?" Yang offered a faint smile. "The book concludes that it's ultimately impossible, but the experiments and ideas within, those are still valuable. The study of alchemy during medieval times played a crucial role in shaping modern chemistry." Curious, King Sang leaned forward and said, "Let me see that book." Yang nodded. "Of course, Father. I even have a translated version. We could read it together if you'd like." Taking the book into his hands, the emperor flipped through the pages, examining the unfamiliar writing. "I just wanted to see what Western script looks like," he remarked. Hours passed. Yang, growing increasingly tired, stifled a yawn. He wanted nothing more than to sleep, but his father remained absorbed in the book, eyes scanning line after line. Yang looked at him with admiration. "Father, aren't you exhausted? You're so focused." Sang chuckled, still absorbed. "This writing, it's really something." The emperor pointed at a line. "Come here and take a look." He gestured to a specific phrase and continued. "If this word appears in multiple places like this, it's probably the subject. And notice, most sentences seem to start with these symbols. This part must represent the beginning of a word, this the middle, and this the end." Listening silently, Yang was astonished. How is he breaking down Latin after barely glancing at it? He's not just brilliant, he's terrifying. Sensing his son's stunned silence, the emperor asked, "Isn't that right?" Snapping out of his thoughts, Yang quickly replied, "Yes, father, you're correct." Sang continued, "These Western letters are nothing like Chinese characters. They all look similar at first glance, yet their meanings change depending on how they're arranged." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. After a moment, he turned to Yang again. "This has me thinking. What do you think about creating a new writing system? One just for Joseon?" Yang's eyes widened. "I've thought about that a lot. Joseon truly needs its own script. Even among scholars, only a handful can truly understand Chinese characters." The emperor hesitated. "But if I announce that publicly, the Hall of Worthies will immediately resist." The Hall of Worthies, a scholarly institute founded by the king, held great influence over state matters and was deeply rooted in Confucian ideals. Yang replied, "But so many people can't even write a simple petition. If you explain the purpose well, they'll understand." The emperor looked at his son with a knowing smile. "You've always had trouble with characters, haven't you?" Yang offered a sheepish grin, but thought silently, "They really are difficult." Sang reflected for a moment. I remember the first time I tried writing a proper sentence. It took me 2 hours just to finish a short poem. Your grandfather laughed so hard when he read it. He rose from his seat and walked toward the door. I've stayed too long. You should get some rest now. Yang bowed respectfully. You too, father. Please take care of yourself. Joseon needs your strength. The emperor looked at his son warmly. You've grown so much. I hope you turn 15 soon. Yang blinked, confused by the remark. But before he could ask, his father just smiled and said, "Go to sleep." The next morning, Yang stood confidently in the royal court and addressed the emperor. I believe the 6 ministries should function independently, with detailed records maintained for each. If everything is only recorded chronologically, future officials will waste time digging through documents. The emperor turned to his ministers. Does anyone disagree? The officials all responded in unison. We support the crown prince's proposal. The emperor nodded. I agree as well. I understand why some decisions were made in the past, but without proper documentation, those reasons may be lost. From now on, each ministry will follow the crown prince's system. Organize and classify records accordingly. The court echoed in agreement. We obey, Your Majesty. After the session, officials filtered out. The Grand Inspector and the Grand Historian walked side by side, their expressions tense. Sorry for the interruption, but if you're loving this series, you don't have to wait. Get up to 16 episodes ahead right now on Patreon. Support the channel, unlock exclusive content, and stay ahead of the story. Links in the description. Now back to the video. This is getting out of hand, the historian muttered. Now the Crown Prince wants to control how we document everything? The Grand Inspector grumbled. Exactly. Aren't the official annals and the Secretariat journals enough? We already document the king's daily life. Why add more? The historian nodded. It's just more work for us, completely unnecessary. The inspector scowled. We're already drowning in work thanks to him. If this keeps up, he'll shake the entire foundation of the court. Frankly, I think he's going to undo everything we've built, the historian countered. He may be zealous, but he still has principles. It won't go that far. Elsewhere, Yang was practically bursting with energy. This is it, real reform. I'm tearing down these rotten customs one by one. I won't let this outdated bureaucracy smother the kingdom any longer. Back with the 2 ministers, the inspector added. But think about it, all of his changes defy tradition. What if he brings back a dangerous precedent? A sharp voice interrupted them. That won't happen. Startled, the 2 men turned and immediately bowed. Chief Minister Ru Yunyan had arrived. With a stern face, he declared, "Too many people read a few books and suddenly think they're qualified to reshape the country. But they don't understand the consequences of meddling with systems they barely grasp." His eyes narrowed. If the Crown Prince ever crosses the line, if he undermines everything we've worked for, I won't just stand by, even if he's the heir to the throne. The scene shifts to the royal court, where King Sajang formally opened the day's session. I imagine the return trip from the Ming court was no easy feat, the king remarked. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty, the Grand Inspector answered with a respectful bow. King Sajang moved on. What is the latest update on the Rosen Embassy? Another official stepped forward. Following negotiations, the Ming authorities have approved the establishment of a Rosen Embassy in Shandong Province. The king nodded, visibly pleased. That's encouraging. Was there anything noteworthy during the trip? The official continued. Yes, Your Majesty. A number of Ming merchants expressed strong interest in purchasing paper from Joseon. Paper? The Crown Prince echoed, slightly leaning forward. Yes, Your Highness, the Grand Inspector affirmed. Our paper is considered far superior in both texture and durability compared to Ming products. They've asked that we bring larger quantities on our next visit. King Sajang took a thoughtful pause, considering whether to order an increase in production at the royal paper mills. Understood. You may take your seat." Just then Hyong, emboldened by the moment, spoke up. "Your Majesty, if I may." With that single sentence, tension swept across the court. The surrounding officials shifted uncomfortably, some breaking into nervous whispers. What now? They all wondered. King Sajang eyed his son. "Must it be said now?" "Yes, father." Hyong replied firmly, his voice calm but resolute. With a sigh that suggested resignation more than annoyance, the king gave him permission. "Very well. Speak." "I propose that we shut down the paper mill." Shock thundered through the hall like a drumbeat. Mouths fell open, murmurs buzzed through the room like hornets. The Crown Prince's suggestion seemed utterly absurd, especially at a time when their paper was gaining international recognition. Many thought he'd finally lost his senses. Wasn't this the same Crown Prince who had previously pushed for economic innovation? Hyong narrowed his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Enough. Let me finish." Clearing his throat, he addressed the court again. "This isn't a contradiction of my principles. It's an extension of them." King Sajang, curious despite the uproar, asked, "Then explain your logic." Hyong bowed slightly and began. "As you're aware, Joseon's paper owes its reputation to the brilliance of our craftsmen. Yet these very artisans live in poverty. Their wages are so meager, many have been forced to take on additional jobs or leave the craft altogether. Some now work the fields or have moved into unrelated trades." Ryu Yunyan's expression darkened, clearly displeased with where this was heading. Hyong pressed on. "If we increase their workload without addressing their compensation, we risk losing even more of them." Ryu interrupted sharply. "This is a result of laziness, not poverty. Look at the artisans in our royal armories. They're granted a 9th rank status and appropriate wages. You rarely see resignations among them." Visibly frustrated, Hyong countered, "And are you saying that those officials don't receive other, more informal benefits? Even your own residence, Lord Ryu, is visited day and night by petitioners and guests." Ryu's voice was calm but defiant. "They come in gratitude. That's simply the custom." "I'm not criticizing the custom," Hyong replied. "But how can we expect paper craftsmen, who receive none of these expressions of goodwill, to pour their hearts into work that doesn't sustain them? If we allow their hardships to continue, not only will we fail to improve our production techniques, we'll lose an entire generation of artisans. The tradition itself will vanish." The room went silent. At last, King Sajang spoke. "The Crown Prince makes a valid point, but..." Ryu Yunyan wasn't finished. "Does the Crown Prince realize it was King Taejong himself who ordered the creation of the paper mill?" "He did so because the paper being collected for monetary purposes varied too greatly in quality. Without a centralized operation, maintaining consistency will once again become a nightmare. I urge you to reconsider, Your Highness." Now the king was torn, caught between two compelling perspectives. He furrowed his brow, deep in thought. What now? He wondered. Hyong turned to him and gave the faintest nod. "You already know the answer, father. Trust yourself." Suddenly, the atmosphere in the court shifted. Hyong's confident expression dimmed as he studied his father's face. King Sajang, calm yet unreadable, turned back to his son. "What do you think?" he asked. That question gave Hyong pause. "When did father develop this habit of deflecting hard questions to me?" he mused. "Is he trying to push me to take more initiative in state affairs?" With a small sigh, the Crown Prince squared his shoulders and answered firmly. "Have we already forgotten the criteria we established for official paper use?" he began. "The gold-nibbed pens, 3 cha wide, 2 cha tall, smooth texture, and a vibrant peach blossom hue. We hire artisans to meet these standards at minimal cost." Ryu Yunyan hesitated. "But what about the expense involved?" Without missing a beat, Hyong continued. "If we recognize these paper craftsmen as royal merchants, It will legitimize their business and allow us to collect taxes on their profits, easily offsetting the cost. Moreover, competition to produce higher quality paper will drive innovation, and our exports to Ming will only increase. This isn't just tradition, it's opportunity. The room fell into thoughtful silence until a voice broke through. I believe the Crown Prince's proposal is sound. It was the Minister of Revenue who added, 3 years have passed since the founding of Joseon, and we still haven't properly resolved this. If we now have a feasible way to ease costs and increase revenue, should we not act on it? Ryu Yunyan's tone sharpened as he shot back, Minister, be careful with your words. Don't forget that our foundation lies in the teachings of the sages. If we neglect that, this nation will lose its soul. He then turned to King Sajang. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's proposal may work in the short term, but long-term prosperity requires moral education, discipline rooted in Confucian virtue. Before the king could respond, another official spoke up. With respect, Grand Inspector, that's theory at best. We cannot preach the words of the sages to starving people. Before education, there must be stability and bread. The remark sparked an uproar among the ministers. How can a senior official say that? One shouted. This is blasphemy against the classics. Hyung watched the unfolding chaos with a smirk. This is better than a play. I should invent popcorn for moments like this. He turned his gaze to the king. Now let's see what father decides. King Sajang, raising his hand slowly, signaled for silence. The room quieted instantly. I've heard enough, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. It is indeed true. Education is vital. But we must not forget the people's survival comes first. I expect each of you to bring me several plans, ones that balance both needs. No one dared to object. They bowed in unison. We will obey your Majesty's command, the king continued. Regarding the paper mill, I believe the Crown Prince's observations are valid, but an immediate shutdown would be reckless. Instead, devise a thorough strategy and submit your recommendations to me. Again, the ministers replied in unison, Yes, Your Majesty. With the matter temporarily resolved, King Sajang turned toward Hyung. Now to you, my son. Yes, father, Hyung replied, bowing respectfully. I know your heart is set on the well-being of the nation. That's your duty as Crown Prince, and for that, I will not chastise you. In fact, I admire your concern. Hyung nodded outwardly, but inwardly thought, this feels like a compliment wrapped in a scolding. The king then added, but every time you speak it causes division. You must understand, your ideas aren't always clear to the ministers or to me. From now on, explain not just the proposal, but the reasoning behind it, your political philosophy. At the mention of political philosophy, Ryu Yunyan's expression darkened. The king continued, You will do this in the main hall. Present your thoughts before all ministers of rank 3 and above. Can you handle this? Excitement flashed in Hyung's eyes. So he wants me to present formally now. That means he's taking me seriously. With confidence, he answered, Yes, father. Give me 5 days to prepare. After the assembly ended and the grand hall emptied, murmurs filled the air as the ministers gathered outside in clusters, their brows furrowed in disbelief. How can a mere child possibly possess a political philosophy? One asked with a hint of disdain. I truly don't understand His Majesty's decision, another muttered. Even if the Crown Prince is unusually bright, he's still just a boy. No amount of preparation can make him convincing. Another official chimed in. He may have 5 days, but what difference will that make? At that moment, Ryu Yunyan broke his silence. We must prepare thoroughly, he said sharply, turning heads. His expression was calm but resolute, as if he'd already begun calculating his next move. This isn't just about quoting the Confucian classics. We need to analyze the policies of other dynasties as well. One minister scoffed. Seriously? He's 9 years old. Isn't this overkill? Yunyan's eyes narrowed. Have you all forgotten what that 9-year-old has already put us through? Don't let his age fool you. His proposals may come from his mouth, but they reflect His Majesty's will. Ask yourselves, has the king ever rejected a single one of the Crown Prince's suggestions? Silence followed. The reality of Yunyan's words began to sink in. He may be young, Yunyan added, but behind him stands the king. That alone should make us cautious. We cannot risk letting our guard down. The foundation of Joseon must not be shaken by the careless mistakes of former rulers. Suddenly, a voice rang out. So what now? Asked the chief censor, raising his voice over the discussion. We must file a formal objection. A boy has no place in political debate. While many plotted how to discredit the crown prince, one man hesitated. Still, the gold-nibbed pen issue proved he's not just clever, he's capable. Before he could elaborate, the chief censor barked. And that's exactly what worries me. That moment marked the start of all this obsession with profit. I should have stood against it then, but I didn't. And now, it's too late. With rising urgency, he declared, "We need to submit a memorial immediately, rejecting the Crown Prince's involvement." The others echoed their agreement, rallying around him as they stormed out to take action. Elsewhere, in a private chamber, an official debriefed King Sang on the backlash. "Your Majesty, the majority of officials seem displeased with the crown prince's initiative." The king frowned, tugging at his earlobe, clearly exasperated. "Why are they all so stuck in their ways?" The official continued. "What's more disappointing is that even the younger officials, those from the censorate and inspectorate, mirror the elders. I expected Yunyan's opposition, given his status. But the younger ones? They're blindly following outdated dogma." He paused, then added, "Still, many admit that the crown prince is brilliant. His drive and intellect are clear." The king's expression darkened. "Is there no one left I can trust to think for themselves?" Back in the palace, Crown Prince Hyong sat deep in thought, mentally replaying the events of the past days. "We're sorely lacking talent," he muttered. "Those fossilized ministers are too set in their ways." A nearby eunuch looked puzzled. "Pardon, Your Highness. What do you mean by fossilized?" Hyong shook his head. "Forget it. I wasn't speaking to you." He exhaled slowly, his mind racing. "This isn't some declining dynasty in its final years. We're just at the beginning of Joseon. Shouldn't the ruling elite be more open-minded?" He clenched his fists. "They'll dismiss me no matter what. I say, just because I'm a child. And now Father wants me to present in front of the third rank and above, the highest ministers." But rather than discouragement, a fire lit in his eyes. "Fine," he said to himself. "I'll give them a taste of what modern leadership really looks like. Let's see how they handle some 21st century strategy." He turned to the eunuch. "I need to prepare a few things. Take me to the Bureau of Graphics, and then to the weapons storage." The eunuch bowed. "As you command, Your Highness." Though inwardly, he couldn't help but wonder what new idea the young prince was planning to unveil. 5 days later, the grand hall at Gyeongbokgung Palace was filled to the brim. The atmosphere buzzed with a mix of anticipation and tension. 2. Ministers greeted each other politely as they waited. "Minister Cha," one said with a smile. "It's been too long." "Minister Park," the other replied warmly. "When did you return to the capital?" "I just got back yesterday," Park replied casually. Their conversation naturally shifted to the reason for their assembly. "So His Majesty gathered us here, just to listen to the Crown Prince's opinions on governance?" Sue asked, clearly unimpressed. "What a pointless exercise." Yun Hyeon, standing nearby, let out a soft sigh. "You're not the only one who thinks so. I doubt many here see this as a valuable use of time." Before the grumbling could grow louder, a voice echoed through the hall. "His Majesty the King is entering." King Junyan strode into the hall with deliberate authority and ascended the throne without delay. His expression was firm as he addressed the ministers. "As you are all aware, The Crown Prince has submitted various proposals of late. However, to truly assess the merit of these suggestions, we must understand the principles that guide them. That is why I've gathered you today, to hear, directly from him, the philosophy behind his politics. Listen closely and offer your guidance, so he may not stray from the righteous path. The ministers bowed their heads in unison. Yes, Your Majesty. Moments later, the sound of steady footsteps filled the chamber. Crown Prince Haiyan entered with a composed demeanor, followed by servants carrying several curious-looking objects. A few ministers exchanged puzzled glances. "What's he brought with him?" one whispered. Standing before his father, Haiyan bowed deeply. "Thank you, Father, for granting me this chance to speak." The king gave a slight nod. "You may begin." Haiyan signaled to his attendants, who promptly revealed a reform proposal scroll, then handed him what looked like a small device. Taking hold of it, he addressed the audience. "Testing, 1, 2. Can everyone hear me?" The sudden amplification of his voice startled the room. "What is that device?" someone murmured. "Why is he so loud?" said another. Ignoring their reactions, Haiyan pressed forward with energy. "Thanks to my father's permission, I am able to address all of you here today. I won't waste time with pleasantries. Let me share my political philosophy directly." The room grew still, curiosity replacing skepticism. As rulers, our responsibility should be to ensure the best outcome for all of humanity. That is my guiding principle. Interestingly, this is not a new idea. It was the very foundation upon which King Wang Geon built the Goryeo dynasty. The true royal way puts the people at the center of governance. He gestured to a diagram being unfurled beside him. But how can our people thrive when most of the land is steep and mountainous, leaving so little space for farming? Our citizens crowd the limited plains and poverty deepens. He paused before continuing. We must stop relying solely on agriculture. We need to promote crafts and trade. Only by doing so can we strengthen our economy and acquire what we lack from abroad. Some ministers sat speechless, others chuckled at the audacity of it. A few leaned forward, intrigued. "And now," Haiyan said, "we come to institutional reform." With confidence, he pointed to another set of illustrations. "We must overhaul the 6 existing ministries. In their place, I propose we establish 3 core bodies: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. These branches will distribute power more efficiently and maintain balance." He moved on. Local governance must also change. No longer should one official carry all responsibilities. Tasks must be shared and delegated properly. "And finally," Haiyan said, raising his voice slightly, "we must uplift the people through education. A strong, educated population is key to national prosperity. Let's provide basic instruction to all and implement systems that prevent wealth hoarding. That means revising land laws, exploiting natural resources like gold and silver, and ensuring fair taxation." A stunned silence overtook the room. "Is this really coming from a child?" one minister whispered. "This is revolutionary." Another breathed. "He might actually be a genius." Noticing the mix of disbelief and awe on their faces, Haiyan smirked to himself. "You think this is bold?" he thought. "You haven't seen anything yet. There's still a long way to go before I reclaim the joy I once knew." Inside the grand hall of Manhwa, the young crown prince stood confidently before the ministers and concluded, "And that, esteemed elders, is the core of my political vision." A hush fell over the room. The elderly ministers, once skeptical, now stared at the boy in stunned silence. He was only 9, yet he spoke like a seasoned statesman. Even King Junan couldn't help but express admiration. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Did you devise all of this on your own?" Yang offered. A modest smile. "Not entirely, Father. I've studied the teachings of our ancient sages and also learned much from Western writings. The king, caught between pride and surprise, replied with a slight chuckle. You've raised points that hadn't even crossed my mind. Many systems have evolved since the founding of our dynasty, but so many outdated ways remain untouched. You honor me too much, the boy responded humbly. There's a Western proverb that says, new wine must be stored in new bottles. It's been 35 years since our dynasty was founded by our great ancestor, but the suffering of the people hasn't eased. That's why I believe real reform is necessary, for the sake of the people's future. Nihan, standing nearby, nodded solemnly as he repeated Hyang's last words. The air in the hall had turned somber, reading the unease in the ministers. Expressions. Hyang raised his voice with conviction. Yes, for the future of everyone. At that, the king declared the session concluded. This ends the Crown Prince's presentation on political reform. As the officials exited the chamber, no one spoke. The silence lingered like fog. Then a voice finally broke through. What are your thoughts? Someone asked. Ying Hong, clearly disturbed, scowled. Thoughts? My mind is spinning. We must act quickly and submit a petition to halt him. He cloaks his ambitions in lofty words like the future of all people, while throwing aside our cherished traditions. He doesn't follow Confucian values, he follows legalism. It's disheartening. A chorus of agreement followed. Yes, I thought the same. The Crown Prince's proposals are reckless. Outlandish ideas like these cannot go unchallenged, another official from the imperial court added. We need to stop this before it goes too far. Swam was the first to step forward with formal opposition. On the surface, the Crown Prince sounds wise and virtuous, but in truth he seeks to resurrect the authoritarian rule of Qin Shi Huang. This cannot be allowed. The murmurs intensified. But the king seems quite fond of him, someone whispered. Swam lowered his voice. Even so, we can't let sentiment doom the dynasty. If it comes to it, we must consider removing the Crown Prince. That suggestion stunned the group. Isn't that far too extreme? Swam stayed resolute. You still think this isn't serious? The king wasn't always like this. Something has changed. Before he could finish, someone quickly clamped a hand over his mouth. Quiet, the person whispered. Are you trying to get yourself executed? Swam shoved the hand away and snapped. Tell me I'm wrong. Are we just going to let a child spout dangerous nonsense unchecked? We need to hold his tutors, and even his highness, accountable. Discipline must come first. Praise without boundaries will ruin him. Another man tried to temper the tension. Then call for more structure in his education. But talk of removing the Crown Prince. Swam interrupted, anger flaring. Look at where we are. If we don't act now, we may not get another chance. Deposing him is the only righteous path left. The atmosphere grew tense. A few voices muttered, "You're speaking too loudly." Meanwhile, not all were against the prince. A smaller group of ministers walked away with lighter steps and renewed hope. That was the most refreshing thing I've heard in years, one said with a smile. I agree. For once someone's talking about real change. No vague nonsense, just practical solutions we desperately need. My thoughts feel clear for the first time in ages, said another. And did you notice the king? He looked ready to implement the Crown Prince's ideas on the spot. I never expected such insight from the boy, someone added. With him leading, Yoshan might finally... But the sentence was cut short as they found themselves face to face with the opposing group. The hallway grew quiet again as the realization hit. Two clear factions had formed, one standing firmly behind the Crown Prince and the other determined to stop him. As the two groups crossed paths in the corridor, the tension between them was palpable. Those who rejected the Crown Prince's ideas scoffed quietly, convinced the supporters were naive idealists wrapped in grand words. On the other hand, the supporters muttered back, calling their opponents rigid traditionalists clinging to outdated systems. "Not worth the breath," one of the dissenters muttered. "Let's just get to work on that petition." "Agreed," another grunted. "That's the only way to stop this madness." Meanwhile, the Crown Prince's allies shared a similar resolve. "They think we're just going to sit back?" one of them whispered. "We can write petitions too, better ones." "Exactly. Let's show them we're not just talk." Later that day, Prince Hyang met with his father, Chongneo, in a private study. The elder man was beaming. "Your address today was outstanding," he said with pride. "Thank you, father." Hyang responded with a cheerful smile. Chongneo looked at him thoughtfully. "As I listened to you speak, I realized how many blind spots I've had. Your points touched on areas I hadn't fully considered. There are policies I feel ready to enact immediately." Hyang's expression turned modest. "You give me too much credit, father. Many of the changes I spoke of require careful groundwork. Implementing them won't be easy." Junan, who had been silently observing, chimed in with a grin. "Even so, it's rare to see such clarity and courage in someone your age. We should have more discussions like this, just the two of us." Chongneo nodded. "Indeed. Though I must admit, I'm bracing myself for the deluge of petitions tomorrow. The Supreme Council won't have a quiet day." Hyang let out a small sigh. "They're going to be busy." "I'll have food sent over to them," Chongneo offered, half-joking. "They'll need the energy." The next morning, two officials stood outside the Supreme Council chamber, staring at the growing pile of documents. "They weren't kidding," one said, almost in awe. "Looks like they pulled an all-nighter." "Impressive. But we can't just stand here gawking." "You're right," the other replied. "Let's get started." Inside, the entire room was in motion. Papers were being sorted, scribes moving quickly. "You all know the drill," one supervisor barked. "Some of these condemn the Crown Prince, others support him. Split them up accordingly." "Yes, understood." In another part of the building, Chongneo sat at his desk, visibly weary. A towering stack of petitions loomed over him. He rubbed his temples before pulling one from the pile and began to read. As he scanned the contents, his brow furrowed. Lines deepened in his face. By the end, his hand had tightened around the scroll in anger. Without hesitation, he called out, "Fang!" The servant appeared quickly. "Yes, Your Highness." "Send word," Chongneo said coldly. "Summon the Crown Prince. At once." Prince Jinho approached the Emperor's chamber and bowed deeply. "Father, you summoned me?" The Emperor, sitting on his throne, gestured for him to rise. He then picked up a scroll and spoke with a firm tone. "Indeed, I did. It seems there are some among the officials who misunderstood your words from yesterday." The Emperor's voice suddenly became sharper. "LG Qin!" At the sound of his name, the old official sprang into action, standing upright. "Yes, Your Highness?" he asked, his voice laced with hesitation. The Emperor's expression grew serious as he held up the petition. "Read this aloud, for the Crown Prince to hear. Let's clear the air." The room grew silent, with all eyes on the old man as he took the scroll. LG Qin hesitated for a moment, but the Emperor's commanding gaze left him no choice. He took the scroll and began to read. "His Highness, the Emperor, in my humble submission, it is my belief that the Crown Prince's policies contain several flawed elements." The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he impatiently interrupted. "Enough with the formalities. Get to the point." The old man paled slightly at the sharp command, but continued. "The first issue concerns the Crown Prince's approach to governance. While he advocates for progress, his methods lean heavily towards the legalist philosophy, far too harsh, too restrictive. Our kingdom, Your Highness, is built on Neo-Confucian principles. This is a belief system designed to foster harmony, not one that imposes stringent rules that harm the people." The officials in the room exchanged glances, some of them tense with anticipation. The old man paused before continuing, his voice shaking slightly. Secondly, the Crown Prince proposed lifting the restrictions on concubine-born children. Such a move undermines the system that distinguishes between the children of first wives and concubines. This is an essential principle established by King Taejong to prevent chaos. Allowing these children to hold positions of power would, as history has shown, only invite corruption. Jinho's brow furrowed as he listened intently. The old man went on. And lastly, the Crown Prince's idea of expanding the number of officials, although seemingly well-intentioned, will only burden the people more. If the workload becomes too overwhelming, we should look to local scholars for help, not increase the number of bureaucrats. The old man stopped reading, his eyes glancing nervously at the room of officials. Jinho remained silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke. "May I respond, Father?" The Emperor's eyes flashed with a sharp gaze, and the tension in the room thickened. After a pause, the Emperor nodded, giving Jinho permission to address the accusations. Jinho stood alone, facing the gathered officials. His voice was calm, but filled with authority. First, LG Qin suggests that our kingdom's guiding philosophy is Neo-Confucianism, but I argue that the true guiding principle of our land is the royal way, which focuses on the well-being of the people. Neo-Confucianism is simply one of the tools we use to achieve this end. To limit ourselves strictly to it would be to constrain our ability to meet the needs of the people. He took a breath and continued, his words cutting through the tension in the room. To put it another way, if the royal way is the plate, then various philosophies and systems of governance are the bowls. Is it truly necessary to distinguish between the tools we use to serve the people? The officials shifted uncomfortably. One attempted to interrupt, but Jinho continued without hesitation. Neo-Confucianism is but a branch of Confucianism, not the entirety of it. Should we confine ourselves to one narrow perspective? That, to me, would be restrictive. LG Qin's expression darkened, but he remained silent, his teeth clenched in frustration. Jinho turned to the second point. Second, he said, the issue of concubine-born children. LG Qin claims that allowing them to hold official positions would lead to abuse of power. But let me ask this. Did not everyone from noble families, whether born of the first wife or concubine, engage in corruption at some point in history? Why then should the children of concubines alone bear the brunt of this accusation? He looked directly at the officials around him. And furthermore, the law clearly states that all who take concubines are guilty of this behavior. Yet, as many of you know, countless ministers here have concubines. How can you, in good conscience, condemn the children of concubines alone? The air in the room grew heavy, and the officials exchanged uneasy glances. Jinho wasn't finished. Has it not become common for prominent families to hide their own wrongdoings while continuing to discriminate against the children born of concubines? This double standard, this hypocrisy, is the true injustice. There was a tense silence. Then, Jinho addressed the third point with a measured tone. Finally, regarding local officials asking scholars for help, have they ever done so in the past? Have they ever opened the grain stores in times of drought or famine to aid the people? No. Instead, what we've seen time and again is exploitation. Local officials have charged exorbitant interest rates, causing the poor to sell their land or become refugees. Jinho's fists clenched as he continued. While the people suffer, their land is seized by the rich, and no help ever comes from those who should have stepped forward. This, too, is a failing of our system. The room fell into a deep silence. The officials were left speechless, the weight of Jinho's words sinking in. The tension in the court was palpable as Hyang addressed Yin Yan directly. Tell me, LG Qin, for the common folk, who is more fearsome than a tiger? Is it the government officials, or is it the local scholars? Yin Yan's face drained of color, and he lowered his gaze, trembling. The emperor, observing the silence, glared at him, waiting for an answer. When no response came, the emperor's voice boomed, "I wish to hear your answer, LG Qin." Under immense pressure, Yin Yan mumbled, "It's the local scholars." A wave of discomfort rippled through the room. The officials shifted uneasily, some exchanging glances, while others remained tense, watching the interaction. The emperor, slightly amused, added, "It seems the petitions submitted by others are nearly identical to LG Qin's. It appears some have the same concerns. How curious." He then picked up another scroll. "But this one is different, Crown Prince. Read it." Jinho nodded and accepted the scroll from his father. As he unfurled the document, his eyes widened in surprise. He scanned the text, and his brow furrowed in disbelief. The emperor noticed his reaction. "What do you think?" he asked. Jinho exhaled slowly before reading aloud. "There is no true joy in luxury. If we encourage indulgence, society will descend into decadence, and wealth will replace virtue. That is why the sages of old divided society into 4 classes: scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants." Standing tall, Jinho declared, "This petition's author should be severely punished." The court gasped at the crown prince's boldness. The officials exchanged worried looks, clearly taken aback by his firm stance. Jinho continued, explaining his reasoning. "In all the writings of the sages, none have advocated for such rigid class divisions. To fabricate teachings for personal gain is an act of treason and disloyalty. Such actions must be punished swiftly." One of the officials, furious at the Crown Prince's words, interjected, "Crown Prince, the author of this petition was simply offering his counsel out of concern for the country. If you punish him simply because you disagree with him, you risk alienating all those who speak honestly." Jinho turned to face the official, his voice calm but resolute. "This isn't honest counsel. It's an attempt to deceive and divide. By fabricating teachings that were never meant to be, the author seeks to undermine the very principles that hold our kingdom together." The official, now growing defensive, countered, "The sages warned us of the dangers of extravagance. We must not allow indulgence to overtake virtue." Jinho's gaze sharpened. "Did the sages ever teach that the noble class had the right to exploit the people? Did they endorse the practice of lending grain at exorbitant interest rates? Should we allow this to continue simply because it has always been this way?" The room fell silent as the weight of his words hung in the air. Jinho continued, his voice firm. "More and more people are selling themselves into slavery due to these oppressive interest rates. Do you think this is right?" Before the official could respond, the emperor slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing in the tense room. Realizing his mistake, Jinho quickly lowered his head. "I apologize, father. I overstepped." The emperor, his expression softened but serious, corrected his son. "Even if your words hold truth, you must not be disrespectful." "That is enough, Jinho." Jinho bowed in apology. "Thank you for your mercy, father." The emperor then shifted his gaze toward the Grand Inspector. "Step forward," he commanded. The Grand Inspector approached, bowing low. "Yes, Your Highness." The emperor handed the petition to the Grand Inspector, saying, "There is a part the Crown Prince hasn't read. You should read it aloud." The Grand Inspector hesitated as he unrolled the scroll. His face paled as he read the contents, his hands trembling as he gripped the paper. After a moment, he fell to his knees, bowing before the emperor. "Your Highness, this is the opinion of an individual, not the entire inspectorate." The court held its breath, awaiting the emperor's response. The emperor looked at the Grand Inspector, his gaze cold. "I know. That is why the Crown Prince did not read it, and neither will I." The Grand Inspector, shaking, expressed his gratitude. "Thank you, Your Highness, for your mercy." The emperor's voice softened. "As for the punishment of the petition's author, I will consider it carefully." The court session concluded, and as the officials began to disperse, A voice called out. It was the Grand Censor, who approached the Grand Inspector with curiosity. What was in that petition? The Grand Inspector did not answer. Instead, he hurriedly walked away, ignoring the repeated calls of the Grand Censor. But soon, an official was seized by the collar, and the enraged Grand Inspector's voice boomed. "You scoundrel! How dare you!" The officials surrounding them rushed to intervene. "Please, my lord, calm down," the Grand Inspector growled. "This fool will ruin us all." He turned to face the official he had grabbed by the collar. "Who do you think you are, suggesting that the Crown Prince be deposed?" The room froze in shock. The officials stared at the Grand Inspector in stunned silence as his words echoed in the tense atmosphere. He continued, his anger palpable. "How dare you suggest such a thing? Who do you think you are to even consider deposing the Crown Prince?" The words of the Grand Official landed like a thunderclap in the quiet hall, leaving the other officials stunned. One of them surged forward, seizing the Grand Official by the collar with both hands. His voice trembled with fury. "Who do you think you are to dare suggest deposing the Crown Prince?" The Grand Official struggled briefly, then spat out his response, each word as sharp as a blade. "How can a prince who rejects Confucian principles and treads the road of rebellion be fit to wear the crown?" His words stoked the Grand Official's rage. He bellowed back, "You would depose a child? He's 9 years old. How could anyone?" "Think that's just?" The official hesitated, but clung to his argument. "What does age have to do with virtue? Even the young must be held to the wisdom of the sages." That was the breaking point. The Grand Official's voice roared through the chamber. "You fool. If you're going to challenge the ruler's direction, you need more than empty conviction. You need the right timing, a strategic advantage, and most importantly, the support of the people." He paused, seething. "Those three forces once made the Crown Prince, our Crown Prince, but now we have none. You're dragging the rest of us into ruin with your recklessness." The room fell into a tense silence. After a pause, the opposing official lifted his head. "It is the duty of every civil servant to speak out against injustice, no matter the danger. To stay silent in the face of wrongdoing is the greater sin." Bishar. Other four officials stood frozen, unsure whether to admire his courage or fear his audacity. The Grand Official finally released his grip, letting his hands drop in disbelief. "Even a fool like you made it into government service. Heaven help us all." In the Crown Prince's chambers, Jinho let out a long, exhausted sigh. "I knew this would happen," he muttered, "but not this quickly. Why does the Chief Minister always stand against me?" He began pacing, frustration seeping into every step. They're clinging to the past, dragging up the same old grievances over and over. Then he stopped mid-step. "Wait. If someone told me to abandon agriculture and put all my faith in industry and trade, wouldn't I be furious too?" He closed his eyes and took a slow, deliberate breath, allowing himself to calm down. Of course they're upset. Their reaction is only natural. Outside, the palace staff could tell he was angry. His aura was unmistakable. Inside, Jinho's eyes narrowed. "Do they think they're the only ones capable of writing memorials to the Emperor? Do they think I can't respond properly?" He marched to his desk, grabbed a brush and began writing. Every stroke was sharp and deliberate. His heart poured into each word. "Fine," he said under his breath. "I'll show them. I'll show them what true humility and resolve look like." No one could say how much time had passed when a puzzled official spotted a familiar figure entering the court office early in the morning. "Wait, aren't you the eunuch from the Eastern Palace? What are you doing here at this hour?" His eyes fell on the stack of scrolls the eunuch was carrying. "What's all this?" The eunuch gave a small bow. "Memorials, written entirely by the Crown Prince." The official blinked. "All of this?" "Yes, sir." He stared at the mountain of documents in silence. After a long moment, he gave a heavy sigh. "So, I suppose we won't be going home today either." When the documents reached the emperor, he burst into laughter. My son, that boy actually wrote a memorial in response? Already? He wiped tears of amusement from his eyes. Truly, he is my son. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. I can't stop him now. Not after this. This is the most unexpected memorial I've ever received. He turned to the stoic figure nearby. Lan Ji Chin, you'd better read it too. Chief Minister Deng Heng's jaw tightened. He bowed stiffly. Yes, Your Majesty. He opened the scroll with visible reluctance, his sour expression catching the attention of the Grand Censor and the Grand Inspector, who exchanged curious glances. The Emperor issued an order to the head of the Board of Revenue, instructing him to deliver the Crown Prince Hyong's memorial to the Minister of Revenue. Upon receiving the document, the Emperor commanded the minister to read it aloud before the entire court. Though visibly unsettled, the minister dared not refuse. Steeling himself, he opened the scroll and began to read. I am Crown Prince Hyong, your loyal subject and heir. I submit this memorial with utmost respect and sincerity. Many ministers have accused me of advocating legalism and cited the collapse of the Qin dynasty as a cautionary tale. But I ask, was it truly legalism that doomed Qin? No. It was the tyranny of Qin Shi Huang and his ministers, who robbed and slaughtered the innocent, alienating the people. Without public support, even the strongest empire will crumble. Yet it was also legalism that forged Qin into the dominant power during the Warring States period. Even today, traces of its principles form the foundation of our most enduring laws. Why do these ideas persist if they were so destructive? There is a saying, a towering tree can stand firm against the wind only because its roots run deep and wide. The governance of a nation is no different. Our empire is young, still putting down its roots. To flourish, we must draw from many philosophies. Must we rely on Confucianism alone, despite the wisdom of the sages? When the Minister of Revenue finished reading, a heavy silence fell over the court. Many were too stunned to speak. The Chief Minister, however, gave a fleeting sneer. Observing the room, the Emperor smiled and declared, "Isn't my son insightful? His words are unexpected, yet they offer much to consider. I want every minister here to reflect deeply on this memorial and share your honest opinions." At once, the court bowed and replied in unison, "By your Majesty's command." A few days passed. Jin Ho strolled beside a palace eunuch, lost in thought. "I feel relieved," he murmured, "now that I've voiced all I needed to say." Not far off, a sudden commotion erupted. "Minister! Wake up! Minister!" servants shouted. The minister lay crumpled on the ground, too exhausted to even open his eyes. "I surrender," he groaned faintly. The eunuch frantically pointed to a towering heap of documents beside him. "There's no time for this. Can't you see the mountain of memorials waiting for you?" The minister let out a cry of despair. "Just end my suffering now!" Jin Ho, witnessing the scene as he passed, couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The problem is clear. Both sides continue to bury each other in memorials, he thought. If I want public support, I must help people recognize the true value of smallpox inoculation. Only when they trust these innovations will I have the chance to introduce broader reforms. I just need a little more time. The right moment will come. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the overburdened minister behind, still lamenting his misfortune. Not long after, during a formal court session, an official reported encouraging news. In regions where smallpox inoculation had been implemented, the number of cases had dropped dramatically. The emperor leaned forward, intrigued. "Excellent. Then let us expand the inoculation effort to other regions." But another minister quickly interjected. "Your Majesty, the number of treated cases is still quite limited." As the court gathered, tension hung in the air. The discussion had shifted to the recent inoculation trials, and the emperor was eager to hear his minister's opinions. Just as the matter was being considered, the chief minister stood and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," he said cautiously, "with all due respect, I believe it is premature to advance this inoculation effort. We've observed only a small number of cases. Shouldn't we monitor the situation a little longer before making a larger commitment? And is it not true this method relies on injecting people with infected cowpox matter? It's unnatural and unclean." The emperor listened thoughtfully and gave a slight nod, indicating that the matter warranted further contemplation. Several days passed. When the court convened again, the emperor addressed his ministers. "The people of Gyeonggi province have mostly received the inoculation, and while there have been some minor adverse reactions, overall, it appears to be successful. Now, neighboring regions are petitioning to allow inoculations within their borders for the safety of their citizens. I believe the time has come to expand the program. What are your thoughts?" The chief minister stepped forward again, brows furrowed in concern. "Your Majesty, I must object. The state treasury is already under strain. Rolling this out to other provinces would require funds we currently do not possess. I urge you to delay the expansion for just a short time." Another minister chimed in with a different tone. "Sire, there are growing reports that prominent families, having heard of the success in Gyeonggi, have begun donating cattle for use in inoculation. Moreover, the number of petitions asking for the program to be brought to their own districts is rising daily." The emperor's eyes brightened with resolve. "Then we cannot wait. Ministers, begin preparations for nationwide inoculation immediately." Again, the chief minister interjected, his voice more urgent. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I must protest." Again. A nationwide rollout presents numerous difficulties. The emperor, now visibly irked, leaned forward. "Explain. What obstacles do you see?" The chief minister straightened his robes and took a breath. "Winter is approaching. Managing supplies, logistics, and funds will be far more difficult in these conditions. Not to mention, collecting cattle and handling inoculations on such a scale will increase expenditures beyond our means." The emperor's patience began to wane. His tone sharpened. "We can purchase cattle from wealthy donors. Many citizens have already pledged contributions to support this initiative. So tell me, what precisely is the problem?" The chief minister stood firm. "Your Majesty, if we solicit funds from scholars and civil officials, it will stir dissent. And the procedure itself, the injection of animal disease into humans, is still unproven on a large scale. How can we justify spreading this to the entire population, especially when the inoculations are being administered by simple cattle handlers with no formal training?" The emperor's face flushed with rage. His hand clenched at his side, veins standing out along his wrist. With a trembling voice filled with fury, he shouted, "Lan Ji Chin, you insolent knave!" The court fell silent as Lan Ji Chin recoiled, startled by the sudden outburst. The emperor pointed directly at him, voice booming through the chamber. "Enough from you! Hold your tongue, this matter is settled." A hush fell over the entire court. Not a single word dared escape the lips of the gathered ministers. Hidden sighs passed between them as the emperor stood trembling with fury, chest heaving. With a sudden motion, he snatched up a scroll and held it aloft. "Do you know what this is?" he bellowed. "A report on smallpox inoculations in Hanyang. You stand there condemning inoculation as dangerous and useless, yet every one of you has received it." He glared at them, eyes blazing. "Every last one of you. You protect yourselves and your families, and then have the audacity to oppose it for the rest of the nation. Hypocrites, cowards with forked tongues." Startled and shaken by the emperor's outburst, the officials fell to their knees at once, their foreheads knocking against the stone floor. "Your Majesty, we have failed you! We are at fault. We deserve punishment." But their groveling only fueled the emperor's wrath. "Spare me your pitiful performances," he snapped. "I don't want to see your faces again. Leave." With that, he rose abruptly from the throne and strode out of the hall, his robe sweeping behind him like a storm. The ministers, panicked and disoriented, cried after him, "Your Majesty, please!" They scrambled on hands and knees, shouting, their voices echoing with desperation. Wait, before we continue, did you know you can watch up to 16 episodes ahead right now? Join our Patreon to unlock exclusive early access and support the series. Don't miss out. The link's in the description. All right, back to the action. Ying Hung, still smarting from the emperor's direct rebuke, fumed silently. One of the older ministers turned on Lan Ji Qin with a hiss. "This is your doing. Don't you know when to stay silent?" Lan Ji Qin said nothing. His expression remained unreadable. His silence only deepened the tension. "What are we supposed to do now?" one minister muttered bitterly. "What can we do?" came another reply. "We'll perform the repentance rites. After that, we'll have to find a way to roll out inoculation across the empire. There's no other choice." With a mix of grumbling and resignation, the ministers filed out into the bleak winter air. Their breath steamed as they muttered about their aching joints and impending rituals. Lan Ji Qin, however, stayed behind. He stood still in the empty court, eyes fixed on the floor. After a long moment, he exhaled deeply. "I've lived too long," he murmured. "If we continue on this path, we will descend into tyranny, just like in the dark days under King Tun." His brow furrowed with worry, he turned and left the court alone. "Even if it costs me everything, I must not allow this to continue." Meanwhile, far from the palace, Jinho listened quietly as the eunuch recounted the chaotic court scene. He nodded thoughtfully. "So that's what father did." He paused, then asked, "And where did he go afterward?" "To visit the queen," the eunuch replied, bowing. A shadow passed over Jinho's face. "Perhaps it's time we stirred the pot a little," he said cryptically. The eunuch blinked. "Your Highness?" Jinho waved it off with a small, sharp smile. "Never mind. There's no point in playing. Mind games now." "Not yet." Back at the temple, the repentance ritual had begun. The Minister of Revenue grumbled as he laid out his mat, his knees cracking audibly. "I'm too old for this nonsense," he muttered. "First the cold, now this ritual, and we still have to deal with inoculation." The frigid air clung to everything, biting at the skin of those outside. Suddenly, a breathless voice broke the silence. "Minister of Revenue, sir." Startled, the minister turned sharply. "What is it? Why are you so frantic?" The man clutched his chest, trying to catch his breath. "The chief minister. He's preparing a memorial, one that directly criticizes His Majesty." Those words struck the Minister of Revenue like thunder in a clear sky. "What?" he gasped, frozen for a heartbeat. Then, without another word, he dashed off, half muttering, as the old man truly lost his senses. When he arrived at the chief minister's residence, the Minister of Revenue didn't wait for formality. He pushed through the doors, his voice raised in alarm. "We must stop him!" His shouting alerted Ying Hong, who turned to see the minister barging in. "What are you doing?" the minister exclaimed, eyes fixed on the parchment in the chief minister's hands. "You're writing another memorial after the repentance ritual? Have you gone mad? It's freezing, and this could spell disaster." But the chief minister remained calm, resolute. "I must write it. This cannot be ignored," he replied. He met the minister's eyes with intensity. "If you care about this dynasty's survival, then you'll understand." "Understand? You must be insane," the Minister of Revenue replied in disbelief. Ying Hong stood, brushing past him. "Step aside. His Majesty must be reminded of what governance truly means. He's forgotten the role of his ministers." With that, he grabbed the scroll and marched out. The Minister of Revenue tried to intervene, but Ying Hong was determined and unstoppable. Defeated, the minister turned toward the onlookers in the room. "Why didn't any of you stop him? Are you all just going to let this happen? Do you want blood on your hands?" One of the officials stepped forward, his voice calm. I didn't stop him because I agree with him. If one claims to be a righteous scholar, one must uphold their convictions. True to his principles, Yinghong submitted the memorial to the emperor. Its contents read, I, Chief Minister Ruo Yinghong, humbly offer this memorial to your majesty. The court exists as the heart of governance. For this reason, every decision must be weighed with the utmost care. Consistency in policy is not a luxury, it is a necessity. If policies shift like the wind, how can the people place their faith in the government? Regarding the matter of smallpox inoculation, Your Majesty initially agreed to test its effects only within Hyang before considering expansion. That plan was prudent. But now, under external suggestions, Your Majesty has chosen to implement it across the entire nation. This abrupt change undermines the principle of consistency. Moreover, governance cannot rest on the will of one. The monarch and his ministers must govern together. The court exists precisely because no ruler can deliberate on every matter alone. If Your Majesty decides unilaterally, what need is there for ministers at all?
Such an approach mirrors tyranny and strays from the way of the sages. If tradition permits a sovereign to dominate unchecked, then what hope remains for the future of the Zhou dynasty? To protect our legacy, consensus must guide every critical
decision. As a loyal servant, I implore Your Majesty to reconsider. Do not proceed with a nationwide implementation of this inoculation without proof of its effectiveness. Should it prove to be beneficial, I, Ruo Yinghong, vow to offer all I possess in support. When the memorial was read aloud before the court, silence consumed the hall. No one dared speak. Beads of sweat formed on the brows of even the highest-ranking ministers. Finally, the emperor broke the stillness. Have you all read this? The ministers responded timidly. Yes, Your Majesty. The emperor's expression was unreadable. Many averted their gaze. He continued, voice now cold and sharp. When I first heard about the benefits of inoculation, I considered a nationwide implementation. But I refrained. Because the chief minister advised caution, I accepted his judgment. His eyes scanned the room. Tell me then, when have I ruled as a tyrant? The court fell deeper into silence. King Chun's face darkened, and a chilling weight settled over the room. I'll ask you once more, King Chun Neon said coldly, his voice echoing through the vast hall. When have I ever ruled as a tyrant? The ministers sat stiffly, silent as statues. Not a soul dared to speak. Though the sun blazed outside, within the chamber the atmosphere was icy, thick with apprehension. The king rose, his robes brushing the polished floor. If a ruler waits endlessly for consensus and misses the crucial moment to act, is he not as worthless as an empty figurehead? His fist slammed down onto the table with a thunderous crack. Tell me, do you truly think I act out of authoritarian impulse? That I make decisions blindly, with no regard for counsel or consequence? The weight of his fury pressed on every man in the room. Beads of sweat formed on foreheads. Hands gripped tightly in their laps. No one dared meet his gaze. Still, King Chun Neon's fury burned hot. Let me pose another question. What happens if smallpox strikes the regions we haven't yet vaccinated? Do we just sit and wait until it spreads to the areas we've protected, just to prove our method works? How many lives will we forfeit in that time? Hundreds? Thousands? Lives twisted by disease, children left impaired for life. Is that the cost you're willing to bear just to feel certain? Each word was a blade, sharp with frustration and grief. The king's voice trembled not with weakness but with the burden of compassion. Then finally, Minister LG Chin spoke up. Your Majesty, he said carefully, we too feel the weight of those potential sacrifices. But we must also prioritize the stability of the kingdom. Smallpox is not new. It is a foe we have faced before. King Chun Neon's face flushed red with renewed rage. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. "You," he growled, but LG Chin pushed on, unflinching. "We believe the number of casualties will remain within a tolerable range. More importantly, we must uphold the traditions of the Yoshian court." That was the final straw. "You dare claim that this is the wisdom of the sages?" The king roared, voice filled with thunder. Before the storm could build further, a messenger burst into the hall, breathless and pale. He fell to his knees and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, urgent news. Speak!" the king barked. "Forgive the interruption, sire, but smallpox has been confirmed in Aeondangpo district, Jiangchan province." The king froze, stunned by the very scenario he had just feared aloud. His mouth fell open. The color drained from his face. Even Minister LG Chin looked shaken, his confidence unraveling as a cold sweat formed along his brow. Without hesitation, the king barked new orders. "Seal off Aeondangpo immediately. Quarantine it from the neighboring regions. Only allow essential communication with Hanyang." "Yes, Your Majesty," the messenger replied, bowing again before hurrying from the room. Turning to the Minister of Revenue, King Chun Neon continued briskly. "What treatment efforts have been initiated?" "We've sent physicians to all corners of the affected district," the minister responded quickly. "Good," the king nodded. "Make sure the sick are treated swiftly and properly." "Yes, Your Majesty." Just then, the sound of running feet echoed in the hall. A small figure burst through the entrance, panting. It was the Crown Prince, Hyon. "Father," he called. "May I speak with you?" The king, caught off guard, blinked and nodded. "What is it, my son?" "I heard about the outbreak in Jiangchan," Hyon said between gasps. "And that you're sending physicians. That's good, but I have a suggestion." The ministers looked on, startled by the boy's sudden appearance. "Go on," said the king, eyes softening slightly. "If we're sending doctors to Jiangchan," Hyon said, "why not also send extra help from Hanyang? People who can assist the doctors, carry supplies, deliver messages, care for the sick." Before the king could answer, LG Chin cut in, voice sharp. "That's too reckless. We can't send untrained citizens into a contaminated district." But the prince held his ground. "The physicians will be overwhelmed. They'll need runners and assistants," Hyon argued. "And if we rely solely on local helpers, we risk more people catching the disease. But if we send healthy, trained volunteers from Hanyang, we can manage it better and prevent more outbreaks." There was a silence. The young prince's words hung in the air, logical and brave. King Chun Neon looked at his son, so young, yet already thinking like a leader. He nodded slowly. The room was thick with tension as the debate continued. Discussions about the illness spreading from Jianggan filled the air, and voices were rising in urgency. "We must act," one advisor proposed. "Bringing medical personnel from Hanyang to aid the Jianggan physicians is a logical move. With proper compensation, we lessen the burden on local doctors, and more importantly, curb the spread of the disease." But Minister Li Jin stepped forward, his expression stern. "Crown Prince, we cannot take such a risk. If those we send from Hanyang contract the illness and bring it back, the capital itself could fall into chaos. Who will answer for that, Prince?" Yong stood quietly for a moment, eyes clear with conviction. Then he raised his voice, firm and unwavering. "I have full faith in the power of smallpox inoculation. If this effort fails, if this method proves ineffective, I will surrender my title as Crown Prince." He placed his hand over his heart and stared directly at the emperor, his gaze resolute. Gasps echoed through the court. Ministers exchanged stunned glances, and even the emperor looked visibly shaken. Yong did not waver. "If the people of Hanyang hesitate to act, then I will go myself. I'll lead the effort to care for the afflicted. I'm not afraid." Silence fell over the chamber like a curtain. One of the older ministers murmured under his breath, "The Crown Prince, again." After a long, heavy pause, the emperor exhaled deeply and turned to the Minister of Revenue. Begin preparations. Issue a decree calling for volunteers from Hanyang. The ministers bowed in unison. By your command, Your Majesty. Then the emperor turned to his son, his voice heavy. And you, Crown Prince, listen carefully. No matter how dire the circumstances, never make such bold promises lightly. That was reckless. Yong bowed his head respectfully. Yes, Father, I understand. But inside, he allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction. The door is open. All I need now is time. A few days later, the distinct sound of the emperor's arrival echoed through the palace corridors. Yong was in the courtyard, lost in thought, when he turned at the sound of footsteps. Father, he greeted, bowing. You're here, the emperor nodded. How are you feeling? Very well, thanks to your concern. Good, said the emperor, gesturing toward a shaded pavilion. Come, let's talk over tea. They sat quietly before the emperor, spoke again. Yong, have you heard the news from Jiangzhou? Yong shook his head. Not yet, Father. A small smile broke on the emperor's face. Aside from the initial 5 cases, there have been no new infections. The Crown Prince's face lit up with surprise and joy. Truly? That's incredible. I admit, the emperor said, even I didn't expect such success. I'm proud of you for placing faith in a method others dismissed as peasant nonsense. You proved them wrong. The recognition filled Hyong with warmth. At last, his father acknowledged him. So much for Li Jin, he thought silently. I'll dismantle him piece by piece. But the emperor's voice interrupted his inner victory. Hyong. Yes, father. The emperor's tone changed. He clutched his teacup tighter, a shadow crossing his face. I've decided. I intend to have Li Jin executed. Yong's smile faded instantly. His breath caught. And I'm seriously considering purging those who supported him, the emperor continued. I've weighed the risks, the future of this kingdom. It must be done. Tell me, do you think I've gone too far? There was a long pause. Hyung's mind raced. Finally, he replied, I believe a strong example must be made. The court has grown stagnant. This could be a turning point, a chance to restore the balance of power where it belongs. The ministers have long wielded more influence than the throne itself. The emperor listened intently, nodding slowly. Encouraged, Yong went on. That said, I'm not convinced Li Jin must die. During the last reign, he served the nation well. His experience is vast. Skepticism toward unfamiliar methods is not treason, merely caution. Perhaps exile would be a more fitting punishment. The emperor remained silent, weighing his son's words. Yong bowed his head again. A decisive action, yes, but tempered by wisdom. Hyung offered a calm, composed smile as he finished presenting his thoughts. The emperor didn't immediately respond, but his silence spoke volumes. He was clearly leaning toward agreement with his son's proposal. After a long pause, the emperor finally broke the stillness. I understand, he said. I will take it under consideration. The day the emperor officially declared Lan Ji-chin's exile, the court was thrown into chaos. Lan Ji-chin, once the esteemed chief minister, fell to his knees before the throne, his forehead pressing against the cold stone floor. Your Majesty, he pleaded, voice trembling with sincerity. Please, I beg you to reconsider. My only intent was to ensure the inoculation's effectiveness, for the sake of the people. But the emperor's expression twisted into anger. Enough, he bellowed. Even now, you try to twist your words and justify your deceit? Before Lan Ji-chin could respond, several ministers joined him in protest, bowing deeply with their hands raised in unison. Your Majesty, one implored, perhaps Chief Minister Lan was mistaken in his approach, but everything he did was in service of the empire. Please, show mercy. The pleas only stoked the emperor's fury. "If you insist on defending him," he growled, his voice laced with venom, "then I will consider every one of you complicit in his treachery. Do not test my patience." Yet one minister stood firm, his tone unwavering. "Your Majesty," he said, "to condemn a loyal servant without just cause is to abandon justice itself. The relationship between monarch and minister must be based on consensus, as the sages have long taught. This is the bedrock of good governance." The emperor's face flushed a deeper red. He rose to his feet, voice thundering through the hall. "Consensus? Sages?" he snapped. "You speak of principles only when they suit your personal gain. Don't insult me. What you desire is not shared governance. You want a figurehead on the throne while you pull the strings." Amid the storm of accusations, Lan Ji Qin raised his head. His eyes were filled with sorrow, but his voice remained calm. "Your Majesty, I never sought to—" Before he could finish, a man in regal purple robes stepped forward. "Your Majesty," the man announced with a crisp salute, "Jin Mu of the Royal Guard awaits your command." The emperor didn't hesitate. "Jin Mu, arrest these traitors. Imprison Lan Ji Qin, the Grand Inspector, and the Grand Censor. All of them." The court froze. The weight of the emperor's decision settled like lead in the air. Gasps echoed as the royal guards moved in. Even as they were dragged away, the accused called out desperately, "Your Majesty, this violates every virtue the sages upheld." "This is the price of progress," the emperor muttered under his breath, unmoved. Not long after, the censorate member who had dared to suggest deposing the crown prince was officially declared guilty of high treason. Shackled in iron, he was sentenced to exile, banished 1,000 miles from the capital for trying to manipulate the monarchy with outdated ideals. The families of Lan Ji Qin, the Grand Inspector, and the Grand Censor were stripped of all noble titles, reduced to commoner status. Their personal wealth was seized, with 80% of their assets confiscated. The officials themselves were exiled, sent to the far reaches of the empire. As the opposition crumbled beneath the weight of their failure to adapt, Yong stood quietly beside the emperor. He allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "They're still breathing after all," he murmured, "and that's more than they deserved." With the exile of the old guard, the road ahead was clear, and the new era had begun. Spring had come at last. From atop his throne, King Chun Neon gazed across the assembled court with a measured calm. Ministers, advisors, and nobles stood in attendance, none absent on such an important day. The king's voice echoed through the grand hall. "It seems everyone is present. Good. I have an announcement of great importance." Murmurs rippled through the room. Whispers of wonder filled the air. How had the crown prince changed so much? Could something as trivial as jump rope truly transform a man's spirit? No one dared say it aloud, but the question hung heavy among the crowd. King Chun Neon did not wait for their thoughts to settle. He placed a thick booklet on the polished table before him, his face glowing with pride. "For the sake of the Joseon dynasty's future, I have decided to enact sweeping reforms." Eyes widened. Gasps passed silently from one face to another, except for one. Yang stood among the court, his face unreadable, though fatigue flickered in his eyes. So it's finally happening, he thought. He had known this moment was coming. Weeks earlier, in the quiet of night, Yang had been drifting into sleep when a voice called softly outside his chamber. "Yang, are you awake?" He stirred at the sound. That voice belonged unmistakably to his father. Sitting up groggily, Yang replied, "No, father, but come in if you wish." His father's voice came through the door. "No need. I only need that user chart from your last presentation." "The chart? It's on my desk," Yang said, rubbing his eyes. "Please take it." "Thank you," came the reply, and the voice called out, "Servant, fetch the chart." A man in green robes stepped inside quietly to retrieve the document. Before leaving, the emperor added warmly, "I'm heading out now. Go back to sleep." "Half asleep," Yang murmured. "Yes, father," and collapsed back onto his bed, unaware that this innocent midnight request would mark the start of many sleepless nights. Not long after, the familiar sound of his father's footsteps once again echoed through the halls. "The emperor has arrived," a courtier announced. Yang turned to greet him with practiced grace. "There's a section in your chart I didn't quite understand," said the king as he entered the room. "Can you explain it to me?" Still groggy from lack of sleep, Yang bowed. "Of course, father. Come in." The next day, as Yang tried to enjoy a quiet lunch, his father raised the topic again, and the next day, and the next. By the third late-night visit, Yang could barely keep his eyes open. It was well past midnight, and yet the emperor's eyes gleamed with more energy than ever as he pored over the chart, deeply engrossed. "I don't think you've grasped it yet," he said, lifting his head. "Let me explain it again." Panic flickered in Hyang's chest. Desperation made him speak quickly. No, father, I understand perfectly." The emperor beamed. "Good, that's my brilliant son." On the outside, Hyang managed to smile, but inside, he was screaming. Back in the present, the king stood at the front of the court, animated as he laid out his plans. "I want all of you to study this proposal thoroughly. Find weaknesses, note improvements, and don't hold back. If any of you have better ideas, speak up." The court dropped to one knee in unison. "As your majesty commands." The king's excitement was infectious. His eyes sparkled with purpose, his tone unwavering. Thus began the age of reform under King Chun-neon. The first initiative targeted the central government. Minister Sa Jiang proposed a bold restructuring, dividing governance into 6 specialized departments, each with its own scope and chain of command. He laid out detailed implementation steps to ensure efficiency. Next came the reorganization of local administration. The province of Gwanga was split into 5 districts, Yonggi into 7, and Gangan into 5. Each district was to establish its own independent local governing body, an unprecedented level of decentralization. And finally, the king turned to what he believed to be the heart of the matter. As he and Hyang walked the palace grounds, discussing the reforms. This is the implied lead-in to the next part. The king turned toward Hyang with a steady gaze. "Today, Crown Prince, we'll be discussing commerce and industry." Hyang blinked in surprise. "Right now, father." The king nodded, his voice calm but firm. "Yes. During my morning exercises, something struck me. In your last presentation, you didn't say it directly, but your chart suggested that advancing commerce and industry would not only grow the economy, but also strengthen the power of the monarchy." He paused. "I understand the economics, but how exactly does the monarchy gain more power through this?" Hyang took a moment to think, then answered carefully. "It's actually quite straightforward, father. Traditionally, agriculture has been the foundation of noble wealth. But if the court encourages commerce and industry, it can generate far more profit than land ownership ever could. That shift pulls economic power toward the throne, toward you, and away from the nobles." The king raised an eyebrow. "But the nobles are still the primary buyers, aren't they? If trade expands, won't they benefit the most, just as you said?" Hyang was ready. "That's a narrow view, father. You need to consider the broader scope." The king glanced briefly at the small boy standing nearby. "The broader scope?" He mulled over the idea. Then his eyes lit up with understanding. Foreign trade." Hyang gave a small, knowing smile, as expected of King Sajang.